A humble grandmother travelled more than 6 hours just to see her grandson at his first communion. She was not invited. Nobody was expecting her. But what no one imagined was that she would be humiliated in front of the entire church, in front of her own daughter, and in front of the boy she loved most in life. This story is going to hurt you. Who let that woman in? The voice bounced off the church walls like a rock thrown with hatred. It was a Saturday morning in New York City. In the St. Jude's Cathedral, everything was decorated with white flowers, gold ribbons, and cameras everywhere. Families smiled. The children were dressed like little angels. Everything seemed perfect. Until she appeared. Martha, in her light grey dress, worn down by the years. With her old sandals, her hair tied up in a makeshift bun, her tanned skin marked by the country sun. She wasn't carrying a designer handbag or perfume. She carried a knitted shawl she had made herself, and a face filled with emotion and fear. She had arrived from rural Pennsylvania. She didn't have an invitation. Nobody expected her. Nobody wanted to see her there. But it was the most important day of her grandson, Michael. Her only grandson. "Someone get her out, please," yelled an elegant woman with an expensive dress and a salon hairstyle. "This is a private ceremony, not a homeless shelter." Eyes fixed on Martha like daggers. Some mothers took their children's hands and moved away. A man murmured, "How do they let people like this in?" Martha stood motionless, in the doorway, as if she had been frozen, her eyes filled with water. But she didn't cry, not yet. She took a step back. Her throat was burning, her hands were trembling. She was about to turn to leave when she heard the voice. "Grandma?" People turned around. And then, the impossible happened. Michael, barely 9 years old, in his white suit and a gold cross on his chest, ran from the altar to the entrance. And without caring about the cameras, the shouting, or the stares, he hugged Martha tightly. "You came," he said through tears. "I knew you would come." Martha hugged him back. She held him tight as if the world were about to end at that instant. But the world didn't end. It got worse. "Michael!" shouted Jennifer, his mother. "Get away from that woman right now!" Martha didn't look at her. She didn't need to. She already knew that tone, that contempt. "Don't make a scene, Michael," Jennifer told him, her face red with rage. "You're ruining everything." "She's my grandmother," the boy yelled. "And I love her." Jennifer took his arm hard. She pulled him away abruptly while he cried. "You shouldn't have come," she said, looking straight into Martha's eyes. And that was the moment Martha understood something very clearly. She hadn't come to see a party. She had come to see with her own eyes what money, pride, and shame were capable of doing to a family. If this story is already touching your heart, support us with a like and subscribe to the channel now. It costs nothing and helps us a lot to continue sharing real stories like this one. Also, if you believe that respect for a grandmother should never be lost, write the word dignity in the comments. But this story hasn't shown the worst yet. Martha said nothing. She just turned slowly, her eyes full, while Michael screamed her name from behind. The guests parted to let her pass, but not as a path is opened for a lady. No. They parted as if she carried a disease. No one looked directly into her eyes. No one defended her. No one dared to say, "This is wrong." Father Robert, who was watching everything from the sacristy, bowed his head. He didn't make a single gesture to stop it. Martha descended the steps with trembling legs. The wind lifted her shawl a little, and with it, the last bit of dignity she had left in that place. Her heart pounded as if something was being torn out of her, but she didn't stop. She didn't break. until she heard the footsteps. Someone was coming behind her. They were not hurried steps. They were firm, decisive, and they were not her grandson's. Martha didn't turn around, but she felt it. She felt the presence of someone who had seen what no one wanted to see, who heard what no one dared to question. That person was about to change everything. And at that instant, without knowing it, Martha stopped being invisible. Martha walked slowly down Main Street, her back hunched, as if the weight of what she had just experienced had broken her inside. The noise of traffic mixed with the distant laughter coming from the church. Every step hurt. Not just her feet, swollen from the long journey, but her chest, where shame and sadness had already taken hold. She didn't look sideways. She just clutched the shawl to her chest as if she wanted to become invisible. She had crossed all of South Carolina to see her grandson, and all she got was a deeper wound than any sore on her body. Behind her, without her noticing, someone was following her. Not hastily, not with bad intentions, but with a kind of silent respect, like someone accompanying a person who has been defeated and doesn't know how to offer help without causing more pain. "Ma'am," said a serious, deliberate voice. "Excuse me for bothering you. Can I walk with you for a moment?" Martha stopped abruptly. She didn't turn around right away. It took her a few seconds to decide whether to keep walking or face the stranger. "I don't have anything, young man," she replied without looking. "I'm not selling anything, nor am I asking for anything. I just wanted to see my grandson." "I'm not a police officer, or a salesman, or a busybody," the man said in a firm but kind tone. "I'm just someone who saw what happened in there, and I couldn't keep quiet." She turned around. Standing in front of her was an older gentleman, perhaps the same age as her. He wore a white, long-sleeved shirt, a straw hat, and a sad but honest look. In his hands, a dark wooden cane that seemed more symbolic than necessary. "My name is Ernest. We don't know each other, but I recognize dignity when I see it. And what you went through in there was not fair." Martha didn't know what to say. She looked at him with suspicion at first, but something in his tone made her lower her guard. No one, in many years, had spoken to her like that, with respect, with humanity. "You saw?" she asked, lowering her voice. "I saw everything. And I also saw how that boy, your grandson, hugged you with a love that isn't seen often anymore." Martha felt something break inside. She closed her eyes for a second. She was about to cry, but she took a deep breath. "Forgive me for intruding, ma'am. What is your name?" "Martha. Martha Baker." Ernest nodded his head, as if the name sounded vaguely familiar, but he didn't say anything yet. "I was just leaving church," he continued. "I'm not from that elegant crowd. I was just coming to pray for my late wife. And when I saw what happened, it made me so angry I can't explain it." "They treated me like trash," Martha murmured, "as if just because I come from the country I'm worth nothing." "And yet it was worth coming," Ernest said. "That boy loves you. I saw it." Martha looked at him for a few seconds. Then she looked down. "Where are you going now?" Ernest asked. "To the bus station. The bus leaves in 1 hour. I don't have anywhere to stay here." "Then allow me to treat you to a coffee," he said. "There's a quiet coffee shop around the corner. I'm not asking you for anything, nor do I want anything in return. Just let me listen to you. If you don't want to talk, we won't talk. But don't let this city spit you out like that, without someone offering you a little comfort." She hesitated. She wasn't used to good intentions. Life had taught her years ago to distrust kind gestures. But her body needed rest, and her soul needed company. "Okay," she finally said, with a slight sigh. But just one coffee. They walked together a few yards in silence. Ernest didn't ask any more questions. He didn't try to comfort her with empty phrases. He just accompanied her, at a slow pace, with respect. They entered the corner coffee shop, a modest diner with wooden chairs and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. They sat at the table closest to the window. A young waitress approached. Ernest ordered 2 black coffees and a cinnamon roll. "How long has it been since you were in New York?" he asked, after a few minutes. "Since my husband died. Matthew," she replied, without looking up. The name made Ernest frown for an instant. "Matthew? What was his last name?" "Matthew Baker. He was a construction worker. Well, he was many things, a working man." Ernest stayed still. Something about that name awoke an old memory, a distant shadow he could barely touch. But before saying anything, he preferred to ask. "And your daughter? The boy's mother?" "Jennifer," Martha said bitterly. "The youngest of my 3 children. She used to visit me. After she got together with that Roger, everything changed. They kept me away from the boy. I don't know if it was out of shame or pure contempt." The silence between them became thick. The coffee arrived. Both drank slowly. Ernest opened his mouth, as if he was about to tell something, but closed it again. It wasn't the moment. Because something told him that the name Matthew Baker wasn't new to him, that he had heard it or read it many years ago. And if what he suspected was true, the woman across from him, that battered woman, invisible to everyone, was much more connected to his own past than he imagined. And that connection was about to come to light. The coffee had gotten cold, but neither of them had noticed. Outside, the New York sun was beginning to set with an orange hue that stained the colonial facades and illuminated the table where Martha and Ernest were still sitting. It wasn't a light conversation. It wasn't a chat between 2 strangers. It was something that was gradually transforming into something denser, something that they didn't know would connect them in a profound way. "Did you say Matthew Baker?" Ernest repeated, his voice lower now, as if chewing the name in his mouth. Martha nodded with a slow movement of her head. "My husband. He died 7 years ago. A heart attack. He was on the job site, loading steel rebar. He collapsed right there, in front of everyone." Ernest remained silent for a few seconds. He looked at her closely, like someone observing a piece that doesn't fit. But that seems to belong to a bigger puzzle. "What was he like?" he asked. "Quiet, very hard-working, a man of few words. He never talked about his childhood or his family. He said he had no one but me and our daughters." Ernest put down the cane, rested it next to the table, and leaned towards her. "Excuse the question, Mrs. Martha, but did Matthew have a scar on his neck, on the left side?" She blinked, surprised. Yes, he had one. It was like a long line. He said he got it as a child, escaping from some dogs. He always avoided talking about it." Ernest took a deep breath. He rested his hands on the table. For an instant, it seemed like he was going to get up, but he restrained himself. "I knew a Matthew Baker," he finally said, "more than 50 years ago, in an orphanage in Queens, when we were children. We were inseparable, but there was a fire in that place, and after that, they assumed he was dead." Martha stared at him, now without blinking. "Are you saying that you—" "I don't know," Ernest interrupted. "I don't want to get ahead of myself. But that name, that scar, the age, everything fits too closely." "Matthew never mentioned anything about a fire or an orphanage," Martha whispered. "Because I didn't either," he replied. For years, I convinced myself that my brother had died in that fire. And over time, I buried that part of my life. They changed my last name at the social services office. They gave me another identity. But I always remembered the name. Martha remained silent. Are you saying that you could be my husband's brother? It could be, Ernest replied, not looking away. I can't assure you. But if he is, then you are not a stranger to me. You would be my family. The silence between the two became thick, like smoke. Tell me something, Mrs. Martha, Ernest continued, more carefully now. Did he leave anything? A letter? A notebook? A document where he mentions anything about his childhood? I don't know, she replied, her voice now trembling. When he died, my daughter Jennifer collected all his things. She and her husband took care of everything. I didn't have access to anything. They only left me an envelope with his watch and a St. Jude prayer card. Ernest closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them slowly. I have records, documents I kept for years, some from the social services, others from the time I was in Queens. If you allow me, I could review them, compare dates, names, see if a Matthew Baker appears, something that gives us certainty. Martha nodded slowly, still incredulous. And what if it is him? She asked, like someone who doesn't dare to imagine. Then your grandson Michael is my blood too, Ernest replied. And you are not as alone as you think. The waitress approached to collect the empty cups. Martha looked out the window. Outside, the afternoon was beginning to disappear, and the city was covered in faint lights. She felt like the world was moving beneath her feet. What was just a visit to see her grandson a few hours ago was now transforming into something much bigger, deeper, more dangerous too. Mr. Ernest, she said suddenly, there's something I haven't told you. He looked at her attentively. I wasn't invited today. My daughter doesn't want me near her. Ever since she got together with that Roger, she has erased me from her life. She's ashamed of me, of how I dress, of how I talk, of having been born to me. That is a sin, Ernest murmured, but not yours. I sometimes think that if Matthew were alive, he wouldn't allow it. He wasn't perfect, but he would never have let me be humiliated like that. And your grandson, she paused, her voice trembled. Michael. He didn't let go of me. He hugged me with his whole body, as if protecting me from the world. And do you know what the worst part is? What? They are going to punish him for it. I know him. Roger is not going to leave him alone, and neither is Jennifer. They are changing him. They are hardening him, just like they did to my daughter. Ernest looked at her in silence. Then, in a very low voice, he said, Then we can't just sit here. What do you propose? If there are documents, if there is proof that Matthew had property, if there is a letter, we have to find it. You have a right to the truth, and that boy has a right to his grandmother, to his history. Martha nodded slowly. In her gaze there was no longer just sadness. Now there was a different spark, a spark of something she hadn't felt in years, courage. You said you have old records. Where do you keep them? In my house, in a wooden box. I haven't opened it in decades. Then let's go. I want to see that box. Ernest picked up his cane. He stood up. Martha did too. They paid the bill in silence and left the coffee shop together. Night had already fallen. The air blew with a strange calm, as if it knew that something important was about to happen. And as they walked toward Ernest's house, he remembered a photograph, one he had kept without understanding its value. A black and white image of two children hugging, one of them with a scar on his neck. It was more than either of them imagined. Ernest's house was located on a quiet street in the Brooklyn neighborhood of Williamsburg. The sidewalks were narrow, and some tree roots lifted the concrete. There was silence in the air, only interrupted by the sound of a distant radio and the occasional passage of an old car. The facade was simple, painted in a beige color already faded by the sun. Martha, walking slowly with her gaze down, entered behind him, crossing a threshold she didn't imagine would change her story. Inside, the atmosphere smelled of stored wood, of memories. Everything was tidy, though with that touch of a house lived in for many years. There were framed photos on a side table, a wall clock that barely worked, and a figure of the Virgin Mary on a shelf with a couple of consumed candles. Ernest invited her to sit in a chair with a firm back, next to the dining room table. "Give me just a minute," he said. "I've had everything stored for years, but I know exactly where it is." He walked towards a dark wooden cabinet that was in a corner of the living room. He carefully opened the bottom part and took out a rectangular box lined with navy blue fabric and secured with an elastic band. He placed it on the table delicately, as if it contained something fragile. Martha said nothing. She just watched him, serious, with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. Ernest untied the ribbon, lifted the lid, and began to calmly take out some old papers, yellowed envelopes, notebooks with damp stains, and finally a photograph. He slid it across the table, turning it towards her. "This is me," he said, pointing to the thinner boy in the image, "and the one hugging me is Matthew." Martha brought the photo closer to her eyes. It took a few seconds. Then her fingers began to tremble. "My God," she whispered. "It's him. I have no doubt. It's my husband." The boy in the image had messy hair, a wide smile, and a noticeable scar on the left side of his neck. Martha recognized it immediately. Many times she had touched it, asking about its origin. And Matthew always answered the same. "It was just playing, when I was a kid. I don't even remember it clearly." "He had that scar since I met him," she said. "He never wanted to tell me how he got it." "It was at the orphanage," Ernest explained. "They had us sleeping on metal cots. One night he fell trying to escape from some older boys who were bothering him. He cut himself on a broken rod. He screamed so much that a nun came running. I was with him, and we never separated after that day." Martha looked at the photo as if the past were speaking to her. "Matthew never told me any of that. I never knew he had lived in an orphanage." "Because he didn't want to remember," Ernest said. "After the fire, they separated us. They sent me to Tarrytown, New York. They changed my last name, like everyone else. Everyone thought he had died. I mourned him like a brother." Martha looked up, and for the first time, her eyes filled with tears. "He always said he had a debt with his childhood, that something was missing. I thought he was talking about money, about work. But now I understand." Ernest remained silent. Then he took another object from the box. It was a small notebook with worn pages. He opened it and showed her a page with large childlike letters. "Matthew and Ernest, brothers till the end." She ran her fingers over the faded ink, as if she could touch that lost past. "You were his brother, then?" "I was, and maybe I still am. But to confirm it, we need more." "He had a wooden box. He always hid it in the closet. The day he died, Jennifer and Roger took it out. They told me they were just worthless papers, that I shouldn't get involved." Ernest frowned. "He might have kept important papers there. Maybe something that links him to me or to some property." "Do you think they knew what was in there?" "I think Roger doesn't take a step without a scheme. If there was anything useful, he hid it." Martha nodded sadly. Ever since they got married, Jennifer changed. She took Michael away from me little by little. And now she has him trapped in that house, surrounded by people who treat him as if love is measured in dollars. Ernest sighed deeply. I'll help you. I have connections in the Queen's archives. We can look for anything in Matthew's name. If we find something, it will be one more proof that you have rights they are denying you. Martha looked at the photo one last time and pressed it against her chest. The only thing I care about is Michael, that he knows who his grandfather was, that they teach him dignity, not shame, and that is not taught with words. It's demonstrated with actions, Ernest said. He stood up from the table and walked toward a shelf where he had some envelopes stored. He returned with one that had no complete address, stained by time. This envelope reached me more than 10 years ago. It said for Martha, rural Pennsylvania. It had no last name or clear sender. I never knew who sent it. I thought about returning it, but I kept it. Today, I think it was meant to be here. Martha took it, and seeing the handwriting, her heart stopped for a second. It's Matthew's writing. Do you want to read it? She shook her head. Not yet. Not here. I need to breathe. Ernest nodded. I can lend you a room. It's not much, but it has a bed, blankets, and privacy. I promise. I mean no disrespect. Martha hesitated for just a second. Then she accepted with a gesture of gratitude. While he prepared the room, she looked at the photo of the two children again. And for the first time, she understood that her story with Matthew had not ended with his death. Something deeper was about to come to light, something that had been buried for decades. And while she put the photo in her purse, Ernest, from the other room, took out a document that he didn't dare show her yet. An old copy of a sales contract signed in Queens, with the full name of Matthew Beggar, dated 1 year before his death. But that truth still had to wait, because someone else also knew about that document, someone who was not willing to let it come to light. The fire started with a spark behind a warehouse in a corner of the old Brooklyn Heights shelter. No one knew exactly what caused it. Some said it was a candle placed incorrectly. Others that it was intentional. The truth is that early that morning, the flames spread through the corridors of the children's home, as if the wind had been waiting for them. Matthew slept on a metal cot next to his brother Ernest. They were 8 and 7 years old, respectively. They had been brought to the shelter after being found wandering the streets of New York, dirty, without papers, without adults to care for them. They never knew for sure who had abandoned them. They only knew that they had each other. That night, the smoke came first, silent, like a thief. Then came the screams. The children began to cough, to move, to push each other. Ernest jumped up, looking for Matthew. He saw him standing, with red eyes, barefoot, shaking off the dizziness. Matthew, we have to get out, Ernest yelled, pulling his arm. The flames were already reaching the ceiling of the main hallway. Explosions of windows, desperate footsteps, and crying could be heard. A nun was trying to kick open a stuck door. Matthew and Ernest ran down a narrow corridor. They tripped. They got up. When they reached the central courtyard, a column of fire fell from the second floor. That's when they were separated. A volunteer, covering his face with a wet cloth, pulled Ernest by the waist and dragged him out of the building. My brother is in there, he screamed, kicking. We can't go back, it's too late, the man yelled as he carried him in his arms. Ernest cried, screamed, thrashed, but they didn't let him go. From the garden, he saw part of the roof collapse. The entire shelter turned into a bonfire, and with it, according to official records, 3 children were lost. One of those names was noted, Matthew Baker. No one ever found him again. Ernest was transferred to an area near Yonkers a few days later, with a new family. They changed his last name, gave him used clothes, and taught him to say that he had no past. For a long time, he believed what they told him, that Matthew had died, that he was lucky to have survived, that he shouldn't look back. But he never stopped doing it. Every night, before sleeping, he touched the scar on his knee, a mark from that fire, and whispered to himself, "If you're alive, find me." On the other side of fate, Matthew also survived. He got out through a back window minutes before the collapse. No one saw him. No one rescued him. He walked alone, bleeding from one leg, until he fell unconscious behind a butcher shop. A man found him at dawn, put him in his truck, and took him to a farm outside rural Pennsylvania. There, a priest registered him as an unidentified child and baptized him with the name the little boy uttered through tears, Matthew. Years passed before Matthew could write his last name correctly. No one claimed his identity. No one looked for him. He didn't ask either. Life took care of hardening him, of making him a man without a past. He never saw a photograph of his childhood again. He never saw Ernest again. Until he met Martha. They married when she was 20 and he was 27. Matthew was a quiet, hard-working man, full of silences. He never talked about his childhood. He just said, "That doesn't matter anymore." Martha, over time, stopped asking. For years, she believed that Matthew's past was something sad, but common. But now, sitting in the room Ernest had offered her, holding that photograph in her hands, she understood everything: the separation, the silence, the hidden pain. That night, she didn't sleep. She reviewed the letter that Ernest had given her and that Matthew had written. She didn't open it yet. She just stroked it with her fingers, as if she could hear her husband's voice. Elsewhere in the city, Ernest wasn't sleeping either. He had left the document on the table. It was a copy of a sales contract for a piece of land in Queens, signed by Matthew Baker, dated the year before his death. Martha was not listed as a co-owner, but there was a note on the back, to leave something for Michael. That land existed. Ernest knew it. And now, someone else did too. A few blocks away, Jennifer was checking her closet. At the bottom, inside an old box, was her father's notebook, the same one she hid the day of the wake. She hadn't thrown it away, not for lack of intention, but because Roger stopped her. He told her, "Keep it. It might be useful to us someday." Jennifer held it in her hands. She hesitated. She hadn't opened it. And she didn't know that on the other side of the city, someone else was looking for exactly that. Someone who wouldn't hesitate to expose the truth, whether they liked it or not. Jennifer opened the closet with slow movements, almost as if she feared the furniture would let out a secret. On the top shelf, covered with an old, hastily folded cloth, was the wooden box she had taken from her father's room the day he died. It was an ordinary box, without a lock, without adornment, but with an invisible weight that she always avoided confronting. She placed it on the matrimonial bed. Roger was not home. He had gone to a meeting with business partners, according to him, although Jennifer no longer believed anything he said. She needed that silence to face what she had kept in the shadow for years. She lifted the lid of the box. Inside, loose papers, a couple of old photographs, some payment receipts, and at the bottom, an off-white envelope with firm, familiar handwriting. For Jennifer. She took it with both hands. She had seen it so many times. She had hidden it. She had avoided it. But now, something inside her asked her to read it. That, for once in her life, she faced the truth without asking permission. She heard footsteps. The door opened with a sharp slam. "With that box again?" Roger said, walking in unannounced. Jennifer hid the envelope behind her, like a teenager caught with a diary. "I'm checking some things of my dad's." "And why? Did nostalgia hit you now?" He scoffed, walking toward the closet to take off his shirt. "I want to read a letter he left me." "What letter?" "One he wrote before he died. I never opened it." Roger looked at her sideways, suspiciously. "And why now?" "Because I feel dirty. Because I saw everything at the church and I didn't do anything. Because Michael looked at me with disappointment." "And you think a letter is going to fix that?" "I don't know, but I want to know what my father thought of me before he died." Roger approached. He tried to take the envelope from her. "Give it to me. I'll read it first." "No," Jennifer said, firm for the first time in a long time. "It's for me." "And what if it says something that could harm us? Like what? Like he had property? Like he left you something and you hid it? Like that old woman, your mother, might file a claim?" Jennifer took a step back. "Are you listening to yourself?" "I'm thinking about what's best for this family. We can't allow that woman to come and stir up the past and poison Michael with stories." "Do you think what happened at the church was her fault?" "It was a lack of respect. Those people shouldn't cross certain lines. And you, Jennifer, you were too soft. She's his grandmother. And that doesn't give her the right to embarrass us in front of everyone." The silence was sharp, like a slamming door. Jennifer turned. She walked to the other side of the room. She opened the letter with trembling hands. Roger watched her from the doorway, frowning. The first line shook her inside. "Daughter, if you are reading this, it's because I didn't have the courage to tell you in person." She continued reading in a low voice. Matthew talked about guilt, pride, mistakes. He asked her forgiveness for not having been a more open father, for not having told her everything he had carried since he was a child. He spoke of Ernest, without naming him. He said that maybe someday someone would look for him. And then came the part that paralyzed her the most. "I kept documents in the box that might one day help you understand why I did what I did. I only ask you one thing. Don't let Roger decide for you. You know what's right." Jennifer closed her eyes. She pressed the envelope against her chest. The letter trembled in her hands. "What does it say?" Roger insisted. "That you don't decide for me." He clenched his teeth. "Are you making a mistake, Jennifer?" "No. The mistake was letting you silence me for years." She walked out of the room with the letter in her hand. She went into Michael's room, saw him sleeping, hugging a pillow. She sat down beside him. She watched him for minutes. He had the calm expression of someone who doesn't know that the world around him is breaking. Then she decided that at dawn, she would do something she hadn't done in years. She was going to look for her mother. She was going to look her in the eyes. And finally, she was going to confront everything she had hidden under the pretext of maintaining appearances. Because it was no longer about her. It was about her son. And the legacy that had been stolen from him without his knowledge. Michael was in his room, lying on the carpet with crayons scattered around him. The thick-paged notebook was open to page 5, where he was just beginning to give shape to a drawing he had been thinking about for days. It wasn't a superhero or a car or a monster. It was her, his grandmother. He had drawn her in her flowered shawl, sitting on a bench like the one in the church courtyard. Her hands were wrinkled, her eyes a little crooked. But for Michael, it was the clearest image he could hold in his memory. At the bottom, he wrote in large letters, "I love you, Grandma." It took him several minutes to choose the background color. Sky blue, because that's how he remembered that day. The sky was very clear, and her smile, even though it was behind sad eyes. He finished and just looked at it. Then he took out the pages, folded them carefully, stored them at the bottom of his school backpack, and hid it behind his desk. He knew he shouldn't do it, but he also knew that if someone found it, especially his mother or Roger, they would destroy it. As if thinking about them summoned him, the door opened without knocking. "What are you doing?" Jennifer asked in a tired voice. "Nothing, I'm drawing." "Can I see?" Michael hesitated. "It's just a drawing." She walked in slowly. She looked at the crayons, the notebook, and managed to see a sheet sticking out of the side pocket of the backpack. "What is that?" "Nothing, Mum." Jennifer reached out and took it. She unfolded the drawing and was silent. Michael stood up suddenly. "Don't tear it up. It's for Grandma." Jennifer's face changed. "You drew that woman? After what she did?" "She didn't do anything," Michael yelled. "You threw her out. You yelled in front of everyone. She protected me from shame. She wasn't supposed to be there. She is my grandmother, and I love her." Jennifer stood still. She took a deep breath. She closed her eyes, and without saying anything more, she tore the drawing in half. Michael didn't cry. He didn't say anything. He sat on the floor and lowered his head. His fury was so great that he couldn't even move. The injustice was like a rock in his chest. Jennifer left the room with the pieces of paper in her hand. She slammed the door shut. In the silence that remained, Michael hugged his knees. His stomach hurt. His ears were burning. He didn't understand why the love he felt for his grandmother was a bad thing. He didn't understand why he had to be quiet. At that moment, something inside him broke, and something else was born. A seed of distance, of distrust, of pain that he didn't know how to explain. The next day at school, his teacher, Ms. Laura, noticed that something wasn't right. "Michael, is something wrong? You're very quiet." "It's nothing." "Do you want to talk about it?" Michael shook his head. He had no words. He just pressed his lips together and looked down. Laura didn't insist. But when she checked his backpack to get his homework notebook, she found a crumpled piece of paper. A fragment with the word Grandma written in pencil and a line of sky blue crayon. She folded it carefully and returned it without asking any more questions. At home, Jennifer didn't mention the drawing. She locked herself in the bedroom with the letter she had read again in the early morning. Her father's words echoed like bells. "Don't let Roger decide for you." But her son's voice echoed even louder. That night, Roger arrived late. He smelled of alcohol. He didn't greet her. He just slumped into the armchair in front of the television. Jennifer looked at him from the hallway, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel fear. She felt disgust. She walked to the kitchen. She opened a drawer and took out an envelope. She put the pieces of the torn drawing inside. Then, she wrote on the back, "Michael deserves to know the truth." She hid it among the books no one touched. She didn't know how or when or where, but she swore that drawing would not be forgotten. Because sometimes the broken pieces are the ones that rebuild a story. And someone was already collecting them, without Jennifer knowing it. That morning, Ernest's house smelled of cinnamon rolls and fresh coffee. Martha had woken up early, as usual, although she hadn't slept well. Her thoughts wouldn't leave her alone. She had dreamed of Matthew, but it wasn't a pleasant dream. He looked at her from afar, with a sad face, as if trying to tell her something without being able to speak. She got up in silence, washed her face at the bathroom sink, and seeing her reflection in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She felt that the years had all fallen on her at once since that day at the church. But there was something inside her that didn't break, her will. Ernest was in the kitchen, already dressed, glancing at some papers on the table. "Good morning, Mrs. Martha," he said without looking up. "There are cinnamon rolls. They're not from a bakery, but they taste good." "Thank you, Mr. Ernest. I'm not very hungry, but I would like some coffee." He poured her a cup. "Were you able to sleep?" "A few hours, but I dreamed of Matthew." He looked at me as if he wanted to tell me something. Maybe he does want to. Martha looked up. "What do you mean?" Ernest put the papers aside. "Look, this morning I was thinking. You told me that your husband always kept a box, and that the last time you saw it was when Jennifer took it out of his room." "That's right. They didn't even let me open it." "And in the house you shared, did Matthew have a place where he hid things? A private corner, a shrine, something that only he touched?" Martha thought for a few seconds. Then her eyes opened a little wider. "He had a shelf. In the hallway. It had a St. Jude statue. He never let me move it. He always said he was his guardian." "Is that shelf still in the house?" "I don't know. I haven't been inside since the day they kicked me out." "Maybe there's something there. Something Matthew left for you and not for his daughter. Will you allow me to go with you?" Martha hesitated. Going back to that house caused her a mixture of fear, nostalgia, and rage, but she also needed answers. "Yes, but I want to go in the afternoon, when Jennifer isn't there. We'll go together. I'll drive." That same day, shortly before 4:55 p.m., they took a taxi to the neighborhood where Martha lived before being displaced. The sky was cloudy, and a slight breeze moistened the air. Upon reaching the street, her heart pounded loudly. The facade of the house was the same. A little more neglected, perhaps, but the same. Martha got out of the car with a firm step. She rang the doorbell. No one answered. She looked at Ernest, whose gaze was already fixed on the slightly open door. "Are you sure?" "Yes. This house was mine too." She carefully pushed the door. It yielded. They entered in silence. Everything smelled of dust and dampness, as if the house hadn't been aired out for days. Some furniture was covered with sheets. In the hallway, the shelf was still there. The statue of St. Jude was intact, though tilted. Martha approached. "Matthew always touched this statue before leaving for work," she whispered. "He said it protected him." Ernest looked behind the statue. Then he noticed something strange. "There's a slot in the back of the shelf. Look." Martha carefully put her fingers in. She pulled out an old envelope, folded in 4. She trembled as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, in Matthew's firm hand. She began to read it in a low voice, her lips trembling with every word. "Martha, if you happen to find this letter, it's because something went wrong. I don't trust Roger. I don't know what Jennifer is plotting. I'm afraid they might hide important things. If something happens to me, look for Ernest." "Yes, Ernest, my brother. He will know what to do. Keep this letter, and don't let yourself be stepped on. You are worth more than all the gold in the world." Martha felt her legs weaken. She leaned against the wall. He knew. Did he know they would betray him? "It looks like it," Ernest replied. "And that's why he left this message. He no longer trusted them." At that moment, a noise brought them out of their trance. The door slammed open. "What are you doing here?" Jennifer shouted from the entrance. Martha turned around with the letter in her hand. Jennifer looked at them with eyes full of rage and nerves. She seemed more scared than furious. "How dare you enter my house without permission?" "This house was mine too," Martha replied, "and you took it from me. That doesn't give you the right to trespass." Ernest intervened. Mrs. Jennifer, we found something. Your father left this letter hidden behind St. Jude. He left it for your mother. Jennifer was speechless. She looked at the letter as if it were a weapon. Give it back, she ordered. No, Martha replied in a firm voice. This letter is mine, and you are going to listen to what it says, whether you want to or not. The tension in the air was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Jennifer took a step back. She looked down. For an instant, she seemed to surrender. But then her cell phone rang. She answered it without looking at the people present. Hello? Yes, I'm already here. What do you mean they broke in? What did they check? No, they didn't find anything. Don't worry. I'll take care of it. She hung up. And when she looked up again, her expression had completely changed. You don't know what you're getting yourselves into, she said coldly. What are you hiding, Jennifer? More than you imagine, she replied. And at that moment, Martha knew that her daughter was not just an accomplice. She was part of something bigger, something Matthew had tried to protect. But he didn't manage to do it in life. Now that truth was beginning to come to light, and neither Jennifer nor Roger could stop it. Father Michael lived in a small house behind the St. Rose of Lima parish, in an old neighborhood of New York. Despite his age, he maintained his lucidity and firm voice, although his hands trembled slightly when he poured the coffee. He was a reserved man, one of those who listen more than they speak, and that is why Matthew respected him so much in life. Ernest had made the call that morning. He explained, without going into too much detail, that Martha, Matthew's widow, wanted to talk to him about something important. The priest accepted without asking questions. When they arrived, he greeted them with a slight smile and a gesture of welcome. Mrs. Martha, it's a pleasure. Your husband spoke of you with admiration. He always said you had a stronger heart than him. Thank you, Father. I don't know if that was true, but I loved him with all my soul. They sat at the dining room table. On the white tablecloth was a notebook, a rosary with green beads, and a small metal box with religious prayer cards. Ernest observed the place carefully. There was a wooden crucifix on the wall and a framed photo of Pope John Paul II. Father, there is something we believe Matthew left with you, Ernest began. A letter or some document. He trusted it would be safe here. The priest nodded calmly. When Matthew passed away, he asked me to keep something. It was a sealed envelope. He gave it to me a few days before his death, during a confession. He said that if something happened to him, I should give it to his wife or to a man named Ernest, which turns out to be you. Martha and Ernest exchanged glances. Do you still have it? She asked urgently. Yes, I never opened it. It's in the same place where I stored it. He got up carefully and went to a wooden cabinet that seemed older than the house itself. He took a small box from the second drawer. From it, he pulled out an envelope sealed with yellow tape. It had Martha's full name written in handwriting, Martha Baker, on the front. She took it with trembling hands. For a moment, she didn't dare to open it. Ernest placed a hand on her shoulder. We are here with you. Martha carefully broke the seal. She pulled out a sheet written on both sides. It was Matthew's handwriting, without a doubt. She began to read in a low voice, pausing at some words. Martha, if you are reading this, it's because I am no longer with you, and I deeply regret it. Not for me, but for what they are going to do to you next. I suspect Roger has falsified documents. I overheard conversations. I saw movements. And I was afraid. Not for myself, but for what that could mean for you and for Michael. Martha's eyes filled with tears. Ernest looked at her in silence, as if every sentence was a confirmation of something he already suspected. I stored a part of my papers with a lawyer who helped me when I bought the land in Queens. His name is Robert Cisneros. He has a copy of the original contract. The other one I left hidden at home, behind St. Jude. You know where. Martha swallowed. If this letter reaches you, go with Ernest. Don't trust anyone else, not even Jennifer. She's not bad, but she's blinded by that man, and I painfully allowed it. Upon reaching the end of the page, Martha noticed that words were missing. The last paragraph was incomplete. It ended abruptly, as if it had been torn off. If something were to suddenly happen to me, I want you to know that the most important thing I have is not the house, nor the land. The most valuable thing I leave in this world is... And there it cut off. There was no more. A page is missing, Ernest said. This is not complete. Are you sure you received it like this? He asked the priest. Completely, I never opened it. I kept it just as Matthew gave it to me. Martha felt a chill run down her spine. That missing sheet could contain something decisive, something Matthew wanted to make clear, and that someone, perhaps, didn't want to be known. Who else could have had access to it before you? Ernest asked. No one, just Matthew. He came one afternoon, gave it to me. We prayed together, and he left. And do you know if that lawyer, Robert Cisneros, is still alive? I haven't seen him in years, but he used to have his office downtown. You could ask. Ernest wrote down the name. Martha put the letter inside her purse, as if carrying a fragile treasure. Thank you, Father, for keeping this, for respecting his word. Matthew was a wounded but honest man. He left many unresolved matters, and I believe you two are the only ones who can bring justice. Leaving the parish house, the air was colder. The sky was cloudy. Ernest walked with a firm step, but Martha paused every so often, as if still digesting what she had read. Ernest, if that sheet was indeed torn off, someone knew this letter existed, and someone wanted to erase the most important thing. And if that's the case, it's no longer just about papers, he replied. This is about protecting Matthew's memory and Michael's future. We have to find that lawyer. Today, we will do it. And if he confirms what Matthew wrote, then we will face Roger with evidence. Martha pressed the purse against her chest. Inside, she not only carried an incomplete letter, she carried the last words of a man who died without being able to defend his family. And unknowingly, someone else was already pulling strings to prevent them from getting to the bottom of everything. Because that missing sheet had not been lost by accident. Someone had it, and they were using it. The office of attorney Robert Cisneros was located on the second floor of an old building in downtown New York, just above a fabric store that smelled of dampness and mothballs. Despite the passage of time, the office maintained an air of respect. The furniture was solid wood, dark, with a smell of wax. On the desk, perfectly organized, rested a pen holder, a calculator with large buttons, and a metal cross nailed to a marble base. Ernest and Martha arrived shortly before noon, after asking in several downtown shops until they found the correct address. They knocked cautiously. They were received by a thin woman with her hair pulled back, thick glasses, and a friendly face. How can I help you? We are here to see Attorney Cisneros. It's about an inheritance matter, Ernest explained. He was Matthew Baker's lawyer. The woman looked at them with surprise. Matthew Baker? I haven't heard that name in years. One moment. Let me see if the attorney can receive you. She disappeared behind a curtain of wooden beads. A couple of minutes later, she returned and signaled them to enter. The office was dimly lit by the natural light coming through the window. Behind the desk, a grey-haired man with a weathered face and a sharp gaze awaited them with his hands clasped. Good day, What can I do for you? Martha was direct. I am Martha Baker, Matthew Baker's widow. He mentioned that you helped him with a property transaction in Queens. The lawyer nodded slowly. Yes, I remember. It was an unusual case. He came alone, with very well-organized documents. He was not a man of many words, but he was very clear about what he wanted. What exactly did he want? Ernest asked. To safeguard a piece of land he bought with great effort. He told me he distrusted his son-in-law, that he feared he would cheat him or falsify documents if something happened to him. That's why he asked me to keep a copy of the original contract. And he also told me something I never forgot. The lawyer opened a desk drawer, took out a blue folder, and placed it on the table. He said, if my wife, or a man named Ernest, ever comes, this document should be theirs. Martha put a hand to her chest. Robert opened the folder and took out a yellowish sheet with signatures in blue ink and a perfectly visible notary seal. This is the original sales contract for the land located in the Long Island City neighborhood in Queens, in the name of Matthew Baker. No one else is listed as the owner. Here are the deeds, the public registry inscription, and the notary payments. Was there ever a modification to this contract? Ernest asked. No, neither did I authorize it, nor is there any legal record of a second deed. But, the lawyer looked at them seriously, about a year ago, I received an unexpected visit. From whom? From Mr. Roger Esposito. He introduced himself as Matthew's son-in-law. He said the land no longer belonged to the deceased, but to him, through a transfer signed before the death. He asked me to validate that document, but I reviewed it, and it was full of irregularities. I told him it was invalid, that if he insisted, he would have to resolve it in court. And what did he do? He left annoyed, but he made it clear to me that he would not stop. Martha felt a pang of anguish in her chest. Then he falsified papers. I don't have direct proof, but I do have suspicions, and now that you come with this letter and the context, I am almost certain. Ernest took the folder. Can we take a certified copy? Of course. I will give you 2. But listen carefully. If what you tell me is true, and he has presented a false deed, you can sue him for fraud and forgery of documents. What you have in your hands is not just an inheritance. It's proof of a crime. Martha pressed her lips together. She took a deep breath. I don't want revenge, attorney, but I also won't let them keep trampling on what Matthew left for our grandson. Then be prepared. This can escalate. That afternoon, leaving the office, the sun hit them directly in the face. Martha squinted and walked silently for a few yards. Ernest accompanied her with a firm step, holding the copies as if carrying gold. And now? She asked. Now we take it slow, step by step. But first, we need to find that missing page from the letter. With that, we can close the whole story. And what if Roger has it? Then he's hiding it out of fear. And when fear appears, the truth is not long in coming out. Martha looked at the sky. There were clouds, and not just above. Somewhere in that city, her daughter carried a heavy silence, and her grandson was trapped between the blood that united him to her and the lies that were pushing him further and further away. But one thing was certain. What Matthew had secretly built was about to come to light. And when that happened, neither power, nor money, nor silence was going to be able to stop what was coming. Michael had gone 2 days without speaking in class. Ms. Laura, the teacher, had noticed his dull gaze, the way he dragged his feet when he walked, his silence even when his classmates laughed or played around him. He was not the same boy who, weeks before, enthusiastically raised his hand to read aloud or proudly show his drawings. Since his mother tore up the drawing of his grandmother, something inside him had gone out. That afternoon, arriving home, he went straight to his room. He closed the door and didn't come out, not even to eat. Jennifer called a couple of times without response. She thought he was angry, that he would get over it. But at nightfall, when she finally went in to see him, she found him trembling, his face red and his lips dry. "Michael," she approached, touched his forehead. "You're burning up." The boy barely opened his eyes. He mumbled something unintelligible and closed them again. Jennifer panicked. "Roger!" she screamed by inertia, even though he no longer lived there. "Michael is sick. Very sick." She ran to her cell phone. She called emergency services. While waiting for the ambulance, she put a damp cloth on his forehead, tucked him in with warm blankets, and murmured hurried prayers, mixed with apologies she didn't dare to say out loud. "Forgive me, son. Forgive me for not knowing how to cherish what you clearly saw. Forgive me for keeping you away from the person who loves you most." The ambulance took 25 minutes to arrive. It seemed like an eternity. At the hospital, he was admitted immediately. They ran tests, put him on a drip, and brought his fever down with medication. The doctor who examined him was direct. "He is dehydrated and has a high fever. It could be a viral infection, but I also notice that there is strong emotional stress. Has he been through anything lately?" Jennifer swallowed. "He has had some family issues." "Well, that also affects things." "A lot. The body reacts." That night, Jennifer fell asleep in a chair next to Michael's bed. She dreamed of her father. She saw him walking down a white hallway, his back to her. She tried to reach him, but she could never touch him. When she woke up, her neck was stiff and her eyes were burning. Michael was still asleep. The doctor came in at 7 a.m. with the results board. "He's going to need rest for a few days, but something important," he said. "He asked for someone while he was sleeping." Jennifer sat up. "For whom?" "A woman. He said grandma several times. Insistently." Jennifer felt something knot in her stomach. "Do you want us to call her?" the doctor asked. "No," she said, and was silent for a few seconds. "I will look for her myself." Hours later, Martha was at Ernest's house, reviewing the property documents with him when the phone rang. It was Jennifer's number. Ernest looked at her attentively as she answered. "Hello? What happened?" On the other end, Jennifer's voice was trembling. "It's Michael. He's in the hospital. He has a high fever. He won't eat. He won't talk. He only asks for you." Martha was silent for a few seconds. "Are you asking me to see him?" "Yes, but don't let him know that I called. Just go, please." Martha hung up without saying anything else. She grabbed her shawl and looked at Ernest. "He needs me." "I'll drive you." When they arrived at the hospital, it was almost sunset. The sky was grey, as if it knew what was about to happen. Martha entered alone. She walked down the hallway with a firm step, although her heart was trembling inside. At the reception, she asked for Michael. They directed her to the room. She pushed the door open slowly. Michael was sleeping, but feeling her presence, he opened his eyes. "Grandma?" Martha approached with a shaky smile. She sat down beside him and stroked his forehead gently. "I'm here, my boy. I didn't leave." Michael took her hand tightly. "Don't leave me again." "Never again," she said. In the doorway, Jennifer watched them, unseen. She covered her mouth with her hand and walked away in silence, carrying a guilt that squeezed her soul. Because even if she wouldn't admit it out loud, for the first time she understood what she had done. She had ripped the only love that asked for nothing in return from her son. And now, that love was giving him life back, in front of her eyes, in front of everything. The next day dawned with a mixture of heavy clouds and weak light filtering through the windows of the Metropolitan Hospital in New York. Martha had spent the entire night sitting next to Michael's bed. She didn't sleep. She didn't eat. She barely moved. She only watched him. Every so often she stroked his forehead, spoke to him softly, or adjusted his blanket. The boy slept deeply, as if his body was trying to repair what his heart had silently endured. When the clock struck 7:15 a.m., Martha got up to go to the bathroom and wash her face. She walked down the hallway without making a sound, as if she was afraid of waking up the entire hospital. Upon returning, already at the entrance of the room, she stopped abruptly. Roger was there, standing next to the bed, arms crossed, with an expression that mixed discomfort with annoyance. Martha looked at him without fear. She was no longer afraid. "What are you doing here?" he asked in a low but cutting tone. "I am with my grandson, where I should have always been." "You are not welcome. This place is for close family, legal family." "I don't care what you say. Michael asked for me. Michael needs me. You will never understand that, because you don't know what it is to love without conditions." Roger took a step toward her. "Don't give me any martyr grandmother speeches. I'm the one who decides here. And if you don't leave on your own, I'll have you thrown out." Martha clutched the shawl to her chest, trembling, but not from fear, but from contained rage. "You've taken off your mask, haven't you? You're not even pretending in front of the boy anymore. It bothers you that I exist because you can't control what I represent to him. I'm not going to argue with you. I'll give you 5 minutes." At that moment, a nurse appeared in the hallway. It was Lisa, a young woman with dark hair and a friendly face, who already knew Michael from previous shifts. She stopped when she saw the tension. "Is everything all right?" she asked. Martha barely shook her head. "He wants me to leave." "Are you Michael's grandmother?" Lisa said, looking at her with compassion. "Yes, and I'm not leaving." Lisa looked at Roger, unafraid. "Then you're not leaving. The boy has improved since she arrived. If anyone doesn't have a reason to be here, it's not her." Roger approached the nurse with a forced smile. "Look, miss, I am this boy's father. Legally, I have the right to decide who enters and who doesn't." "And his mother? Where is his mother?" "She's at home, resting." "Well, I'm letting you know that unless she comes and gives that order, the lady stays. And if you want to make a scene, take it up with the administration. But don't yell at anyone here. This is a hospital." Roger clenched his jaw, but said no more. He turned around and left the room, slamming the door with contained violence. Martha sat down next to the bed again. Lisa approached and put a hand on her shoulder. "Don't let anyone make you leave. The boy needs you. It's not a matter of medicine. It's a matter of the soul." "Thank you, dear. God bless you." Lisa left without saying more. Martha returned to holding her grandson's hand. She spoke to him in a low voice, telling him stories about the countryside, about when Matthew planted corn and came back with boots full of dirt. Michael didn't say anything, but his eyelids moved gently. An hour later, Martha went out to get a coffee from the machine in the hallway. When she returned, she found a folded sheet of paper on the chair. She opened it. It was handwritten, in large, hurried letters. "Heads up. He is planning to take the boy out of the hospital without the mother's permission. Tonight. Lisa." Martha felt her stomach knot. She ran down the hallway until she found the nurse. "Is this true?" "Some colleagues told me." He spoke with a security orderly. He said he was going to transfer the boy to a private clinic, but without the mother's authorization. They are waiting for the early morning. Why would he do that? Because he knows you can get in here. You can't there. Martha put her hands to her mouth. I can't allow it. You are not alone. I'm on duty tonight. And if you trust me, I can help you. How? Lisa lowered her voice. Wait. When night comes, I'll sneak you in without them noticing. And if they try to move the boy, you will be there. Martha nodded. Her heart was racing, but there was a new certainty in her soul. Roger not only wanted to separate her from her grandson, now he was willing to take him somewhere else, to another hospital, where no one could interfere. Not his mother, not her. But this time, he wasn't going to succeed. Because that night, within those walls, someone was willing to do whatever it took to defend her family, even if it meant facing the darkness head-on. The hospital clock marked 11:15 p.m. In the hallways, the fluorescent lights hummed in silence, and the echo of footsteps had died down. Most of the rooms were in semi-darkness. Patients slept. The staff walked at a slower pace. Everything seemed calm, except for Martha. Sitting on a bench in the hallway, with the shawl crossed firmly over her chest, she watched the clock with contained anxiety. Lisa hadn't shown any signs for 2 hours. She had only left her a brief instruction. Wait for me here. When the shift changes, I'll bring you in. Beside her, a security guard yawned in front of the door to the restricted area. Another was drinking coffee by the elevator entrance. Everything seemed against her. But Martha was not going to give up. Not now. At 11:27 p.m., Lisa appeared from the laundry area with an extra scrub top folded in her arms and a clipboard in her hand. Without a word, she signaled with her head. Martha immediately stood up. The nurse led her through a side door, unseen by the guards. They went up a service staircase to the 3rd floor. There, Lisa gave her the top. Put it over your dress. If anyone asks, say you're on the night shift for patient companionship. Don't give any more details. Martha obeyed without asking. Once ready, they walked down a long corridor, without talking, until they reached the room where Michael was sleeping. Lisa opened the door with her card. No one saw them. The room was in semi-darkness, illuminated only by the IV monitor and the faint light from the hallway lamp that filtered under the door. Michael slept peacefully, his breathing steady, his face less pale. Martha approached slowly. She sat in the chair next to his bed and stroked his hand. Lisa left them alone. Minutes passed. Martha just watched him. Sometimes she spoke to him very softly, with phrases like, "I'm here, my boy. You are not going anywhere without me." At midnight, the silence was interrupted by a muffled conversation on the other side of the hallway. Martha tensed. She recognized one of the voices. It was Roger. "Are you sure the old woman hasn't come back in?" "Absolutely sure, Mr. Esposito. I've been at the entrance since 6. She hasn't passed." "Good. We're taking him out this morning. The private ambulance arrives at 3. The transfer is already authorized. I just need you to help me avoid any interference." "Understood." Martha felt a knot in her throat. She looked at Michael. She kissed his forehead. At 1:30 a.m., Lisa returned with a coffee. "It's going to be early this morning, at 3. I already heard him. What can we do?" "We're going to move him before they arrive. Not far. Just to another room. If they ask, we'll say he developed complications and was urgently transferred by the on-call doctor's order. I'll make sure they don't find him." "And if they find out it was me?" Lisa looked her in the eyes. "I don't care. I've kept quiet too much in life. This time, if they fire me, I'll leave knowing I did the right thing." Martha didn't reply. She just squeezed the young nurse's hand. Between two women separated by decades in age, a silent bond had been created, made of justice and dignity. At 2 o'clock, Martha was already in the new room with Michael. Lisa had made the change using a transfer gurney with the help of another trusted orderly. They took him wrapped up, asleep, without anyone stopping them. The new room was at the end of the floor, away from the elevators. At 2:45 a.m., Martha heard loud footsteps in the hallway, knocks on the door of the previous room. "Where is the boy?" Roger's voice asked, more tense. "He's not here," a nurse replied. "There was a transfer." "What do you mean, a transfer?" "The on-call doctor ordered him moved for intensive monitoring. He is in a closed observation area. Only medical personnel can enter." "That's not possible. I had authorization to transfer him." "You don't have medical authorization. And until the child is stable, no one is taking him out." The slamming door was heard from the other end of the floor. Martha, from the shadows of the new room, released the air she had been holding. She approached Michael's bed and whispered, "They're not going to take you now. You're safe." But she knew that wasn't entirely true. Roger wouldn't stop, and if he had tried to take him out of the hospital, it was because something else was approaching. Something darker. And now more than ever, they needed proof. Testimonies. People who would speak. Because justice was no longer enough. It was time for the truth to come to light, whatever the cost. Ernest had spent all morning reviewing old documents at the dining room table. He had a pile of folders, receipts, and copies of deeds in front of him. In the center lay the certified copies he had obtained from the Queen's Public Registry, with Matthew Baker's name as the sole owner of the land. Everything was in order. But there was a problem. That same land appeared registered again under a second deed, dated just 2 months after Matthew's death, with the name Roger Esposito as the new title holder. A double deed. A fraud. Ernest understood it as soon as he compared both versions. The notary seal on the second deed was similar, but not identical. The deceased's signature was crude, shaky, falsified. And the most serious thing, the public registry folio was duplicated, something that legally could not happen without a direct alteration of the system. "He didn't do this alone," Ernest muttered, clenching his teeth. He needed help. Someone inside the registry, someone who facilitated access, or someone who owed him favors. He put the 2 deeds in a folder and headed to the office of his trusted friend, Attorney Jones, a retired criminal lawyer who still consulted on delicate matters. Jones read everything calmly, his glasses perched on the edge of his nose. "This is serious, Ernest. If this reaches the district attorney's office, they can open an investigation for forgery of documents, identity theft, and financial fraud. It's not a simple administrative error. This is criminal." "And if we report him?" "They will ask for proof that Matthew did not sign that second deed. The ideal would be a handwriting expert analysis. And witnesses. People who can declare that Matthew never made that transaction. Do you have that?" "We have the letter Matthew left. And we have Martha, his wife. She can testify that Matthew never mentioned giving up the land. We also have the lawyer who handled the first deed, Robert Cisneros." Jones nodded slowly. "Then you are in a position to act. But do it quickly. If Roger suspects you're putting something together, he can disappear or erase more evidence." "Where is he now?" "We don't know. He tried to take the boy out of the hospital without the mother's permission. He failed, thanks to a nurse who stopped him." "Then he is desperate. And a desperate man is more dangerous than a liar with power." Ernest left the office with a heavy heart. He had the proof in his hand. But now he needed something else, the courage to confront him head on, and he knew Martha had it. Hours later, back home, he explained everything in detail. Martha listened in silence, sitting at the table, her hands clasped in her lap. I always knew Roger had a dirty ambition, but I didn't think he was capable of stealing something that didn't belong to him, and much less of forging my husband's signature. He didn't do it alone, Martha. This was planned, cold, like someone who knows no one will dare to check the past. Well, he was wrong, because I'm not just going to check the past. I'm going to bring it to light. Are you willing to go and give a statement? I am willing to do whatever it takes. That night, while Martha was organizing her things to go to the courthouse the next day, she received an unexpected call. It was Lisa. Mrs. Martha, I have something you need to see. What happened? A colleague at the hospital sent me a file, a video from a security camera in the hallway, the day Roger tried to take the boy out. It's clear what he was planning. Do you have the video? Yes. And not only that, I also have an audio I recorded myself. He threatened me. He told me that if I didn't shut up, he would hurt me. Are you okay? Yes, but I'm scared. I want to give it to you. I want this to be useful for something, for him to pay for what he has done. Martha didn't hesitate. Come to the house first thing tomorrow morning. We'll give everything to the lawyer. I will. And if they call me to testify, I'll go. I'm tired of seeing good people silenced and those who trample others rewarded. When she hung up, Martha felt a new strength in her chest. It was no longer just the pain from the humiliation suffered, nor the rage over her daughter's abandonment. Now she had a purpose. She was going to defend her husband's name. She was going to protect her grandson. And no one, not Roger, nor his lies, nor his dirty power, was going to stop her. Because the truth was already awake. And someone, from the shadows, had already begun to tremble. In the Jackson Heights neighborhood of Queens, Roger walked back and forth inside a room with closed blinds and a half-empty bottle of bourbon on the table. His eyes, injected with fatigue, kept looking at his cell phone. He was waiting for a call, or perhaps a miracle. But he knew that what was coming was bigger than any excuse he could invent. It was no longer just the property, nor the letter, not even the grandmother who wouldn't give up. It was the boy, Michael. That boy who, unintentionally, was about to destroy everything he had built for years. He poured a short drink and downed it in one gulp. He remembered perfectly how it all started. Matthew didn't trust him. Never did. From the first day he met him, when Jennifer introduced him as her fiancé, Matthew looked at him with that expression between disdain and warning, as if he already knew what he carried inside. That house is not yours. That woman does not belong to you, and my daughter doesn't either, Matthew had told him one night after an argument. But Roger was patient. He knew he couldn't beat him with words, so he set out to undermine him from within. He spoke to him with false respect, did minimal favors for him, accompanied him shopping. Winning Jennifer over was easy. She just wanted to be loved. And he knew how to pretend. Little by little, he managed to convince her that Matthew was exaggerating, that Martha's humility was a burden, that Michael needed a different kind of life, more comfortable, cleaner, more modern. Your mother already lived her life, he told her. Now it's your turn. And Jennifer believed him, or wanted to believe him. When Matthew had heart problems, Roger saw his opportunity. He accompanied him to a notary on a false appointment, where he had him sign supporting documents that were actually the basis of a supposed property transfer. But Matthew didn't sign anything important. Roger needed more. So after Matthew's death, he forged the signature with the help of a contact in the public registry. A similar signature, a modified date. A retired notary, he offered money and silence. But he didn't count on Matthew having left letters, that he had hidden copies, that he had written a clear warning in his own handwriting. And much less did he count on Martha, because he had underestimated her, as many men do with women like her. Quiet, humble, tired, but whole. Now everything was crumbling. The press was already starting to call him the accused son-in-law. The neighbours in the gated community avoided greeting him. His own accountant refused to return his calls. He called Jennifer. "Don't call me anymore," she said on the first ring. "I don't want anything to do with you anymore." "You knew what I was doing," he replied, furious. "Don't pretend now." "I suspected, but you asked me to trust you, to shut up. And I shut up, like a fool, like a coward. And what are you going to do now? Testify against me?" "I'm going to tell the truth, all of it." Roger threw his cell phone against the wall. He walked to the bathroom. He looked at himself in the mirror. His reflection no longer had the arrogance of before. He was a worn-out man, about to fall. Just then there was a knock on the door. It was the same friend who helped him with the document forgery. "I can't help you anymore," he said, without preamble. "Matthew's lawyer has already filed a complaint. The handwriting expert is analysing the signatures. And there's a video of you at the hospital trying to take the boy out without authorization. Who recorded it? A nurse. And they leaked it to the press. If you stay in the city, they will arrest you." Roger stood still. "What do you recommend?" "Leave. Today. And Jennifer? She's no longer your ally." That night, he packed what little he had in a black bag. He left through the back door of the building, covering his face with a cap. He took a taxi that took him to the old bus terminal. He didn't have a clear plan, but he knew they were looking for him. The prosecutor's office already had an order for questioning, and soon it would be an arrest warrant. The last thing he saw on his cell phone, before turning it off forever, was a video of Michael hugging his grandmother in the hospital, with a phrase in the background. "My grandma didn't leave. She came for me." What Roger didn't know was that at that very moment, someone else had just handed a folder with all the evidence to an on-duty prosecutor, and a court order was already on its way, with a full name and a past that was finally catching up to the culprit. The morning had started with a strange calm at Ernest's house. Martha quietly made coffee while Michael drew at the dining room table, concentrated, without saying a word. Since his recovery at the hospital, the boy had remained quieter than before, but it was no longer sadness. It was something more mature, deeper, as if inside he knew that the adult world had changed forever. Ernest came in from the living room with a folder under his arm. "They just confirmed that the video is already in the prosecutor's hands. They reviewed it last night." Martha put down the coffee pot and looked at him attentively. "And what did they say?" "That it's conclusive. Roger is seen negotiating with a hospital guard. You can hear him mentioning that he wants to take the boy out without the mother signing anything. And in addition, there's Lisa's recording. That sinks him." "Is she going to testify?" "Yes. She told me on the phone. She's scared, but determined. We agreed to meet her at noon today to prepare her testimony with the lawyer." Martha nodded. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. They were tears, contained for years, now turned into serene rage. "Matthew would be proud of her," he said. "Of Lisa, and of you, and of Michael." Ernest sat down next to the boy. He gently ruffled his hair. "What are you drawing, champ?" Michael lifted the sheet. It was a portrait of his grandmother with a cape, like a superhero, holding his hand. "Her." Martha hugged him in silence. At 12:15 p.m., Lisa arrived promptly. dressed in simple clothes and a backpack slung over her shoulder. She walked in with firm steps, although her hands trembled slightly. "Did you bring the video?" Ernest asked. She nodded. She took out a USB drive and a small notebook. "Here it is. And here, the transcription of what he told me when he threatened me. I didn't record all of it, but I wrote down every word as soon as I left his office. My stomach still burns when I remember it." "You are not alone," Martha told her, "and no one is going to touch you while I'm alive." Ernest read the document calmly. Then he connected the USB to his computer. The black and white image of the hospital hallway appeared on the screen. Roger was seen talking to a security guard. There was no sound, but the gestures, the movements, and the way Roger handed over an envelope were clear. Then, another fragment, the audio recorded by Lisa with her cell phone, hidden in her scrubs. "If you say anything, I assure you that you will regret it. That old woman has no business being here. That child cannot grow up with trash." "He said that," Lisa clarified, her eyes full of rage. "He spoke to me like that, as if I were his servant, as if the hospital were his property." Ernest closed the computer carefully. "This is enough to move forward with the criminal complaint." "And what happens now?" Martha asked. "Tomorrow morning we will go to give a statement, you, Lisa, and I. The prosecutor is already aware. Roger has an order for questioning. If he doesn't turn himself in, he will officially become a wanted person. He can't run forever." Lisa took a deep breath. Then she lowered her voice. "I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because Michael deserves to grow up knowing the truth, and because his grandfather doesn't deserve to be erased like that." Martha approached her. She hugged her tightly. "Thank you, dear, for not being quiet, for not being afraid." Ernest observed the scene with moist eyes. Then he looked out the window. The sky was cloudy, but it wasn't threatening rain. It was a thick grey, as if something was brewing up there. Suddenly, his cell phone vibrated. It was a message from the lawyer. He read it in a low voice. Then he turned to Martha. "They found him." "Who?" "Roger, in New Jersey. He had rented a room under another name, but someone recognized him from the photo circulating online." "And did they arrest him?" "Not yet. But there is an active warrant. They are going to intercept him tonight." Martha closed her eyes for a moment. "Then it won't be long now." "No," Ernest said. "The most important thing is missing. That he faces what he did, and that you can look Michael in the eyes and tell him that his history was not trampled." Lisa said goodbye with a silent hug. She knew her role hadn't ended, but the hardest part was already done, speaking out. That night, Martha lit a candle in front of the St. Jude statue. She placed Matthew's photo and the incomplete letter next to it. Then she sat with Michael in the living room, and they began to read a children's book together. "Do you know why your name is Michael?" she asked him. "No." "Because your grandfather said he wanted a warrior's name." The boy smiled. "And do you think I'm a warrior?" "I think you are the heart of this family." And as she read in a low voice, the phone rang in the dining room. Ernest answered. He listened without saying anything. He hung up. He approached Martha. "They have him." And although she didn't respond with words, her eyes filled with contained tears, because she knew that moment was just the beginning of the real judgment, the one made with truth, with memory, and with dignity. It was noon in the Washington Heights neighborhood, a place with narrow streets, clotheslines on the roofs, and the smell of freshly made tortillas. In the corner stationery store, the television hung above the door broadcast local news. No one paid too much attention until a familiar face appeared on the screen. Roger Esposito, a real estate businessman in New York, was arrested this morning in New Jersey following an arrest warrant issued by the state attorney's office. He is accused of forgery of documents, attempted illegal kidnapping of a minor, and financial fraud. Silence fell over the shop. "Isn't that Jennifer's husband?" murmured a woman in a floral dress and apron. "The one who yelled at the old lady in church," replied another, frowning. "I knew that man couldn't be trusted." The news spread like wildfire through neighborhood chats, WhatsApp groups, town squares, and markets. The same video that Lisa had delivered, the one where Roger tried to take Michael out of the hospital, was already circulating everywhere. With it came comments, insults, indignation, but also something no one expected: respect for Martha. That woman who had been humiliated in front of everyone was now recognized as what she always was, the grandmother who never gave up. At Michael's school, the teachers commented in low voices. "Did you see the news? That lady, everything she had to endure. And even so, she never responded with yelling, only with dignity. The boy is different since he sees her, calmer, firmer." In the park where she used to walk, some neighbors approached discreetly. One offered her a seat. Another gave her a bag with baked goods. No one said much, but everyone knew. And in Martha's eyes, although tired, something new shone. Not pride, not revenge, something deeper: peace. Meanwhile, Jennifer walked with her head down through the market. She felt the stares, the murmurs, the silent judgments. She was no longer Mr. Matthews' daughter. Now she was the one who let her husband steal from her own mother. That day, Jennifer didn't go to work. She didn't have the courage. She also didn't answer calls. She closed the curtains. She turned off her cell phone. She just sat on the couch with the envelope in her hands, the last page of her father's letter, the one she had hidden for so long, out of shame, fear, or simple cowardice. She read it once more. "And if something were to suddenly happen to me, I want you to know that the most important thing I leave is not property or paper. It is Michael. He is your responsibility. Take care of him, and never forget where you come from. Your mother is not a burden. She is your root." Jennifer burst into tears. Hours later, Ernest and Martha presented themselves at the district attorney's office. They gave testimony, handed over copies of everything: letters, audios, records, notary statements. Everything was documented. The prosecutor received them kindly. "Mrs. Martha, your case will be exemplary, not only because of the seriousness of the facts, but because of the integrity with which you have faced every obstacle." Martha just nodded. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. "I didn't come for revenge. I came to clear my husband's name, and to protect what he left me, his grandson." Before leaving the building, she received a call from the hospital. Michael was already discharged. He could go home. "With you?" the doctor asked. "Yes," Martha replied, in a firm voice. "With me." And that night, when they crossed the door of the old house, the one Matthew had built with his own hands, Michael stopped in front of the frame and asked, "Did you and my grandfather live here?" "True love lived here, son, even if the world forgot it." But what Martha didn't know was that the next day, something else would be revealed: a letter, a confession, and a name no one expected. Because the past still had one last truth to deliver, one that would change the history of that family forever. Jennifer's fingers were trembling when she opened the envelope she had hidden for so long for the third time. She didn't know how many times she had read it since the whole scandal began, but this time was different. This time she had decided to hand it over. The last page of Matthew's letter, the one she hid from the beginning out of fear. Fear of what it said, but even more, fear of what it confirmed, that her father didn't trust her, that in his last days he had preferred to leave everything to Martha and not to his daughter, because he saw her change, because he knew she let herself be dragged down. And if you ever read all of this, Jennifer, I hope it's not too late to understand. Not everything that shines is success. Not everything that hurts is punishment. The life that man offered you is a golden cage, and Michael doesn't deserve to live locked in it. My true inheritance is freedom, that which can only be offered to you by someone who truly loves you, even if they have nothing to give you. Like your mother. Like me. Jennifer folded the sheet carefully. Her tears fell quickly onto the paper, leaving soft but visible marks. She put it in a new envelope, wrote "For my mother" on the front, and left without telling anyone. She took a taxi to Ernest's house. It was the first time she had shown up there since everything exploded. She knocked on the door and waited. Martha took a long time to open it, and when she did, she was speechless to see her daughter standing there, with a pale face and swollen eyes. "What are you doing here?" "I came to give you something I should have given you a long time ago." Martha didn't move. Jennifer held out the envelope. "It's the last page of the letter, the one Dad left me, and that I hid. There are no excuses. I just wanted you to know that I'm not afraid anymore." Martha took the envelope with firm hands. She didn't open it. She just held it against her chest. "Why now?" "Because I'm not the same anymore. Because I saw in Michael's eyes what you had from the beginning. And because I don't want him to remember me as the woman who kept him from his truth. And what do you expect from me?" "Nothing. Then you're at peace?" "Not yet. But starting is something." Martha nodded. Then she closed the door gently. That night, she read the sheet calmly, sitting in the living room, with a lamp on and Matthew's portrait on the table. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just murmured. "You always knew, Matthew. You always knew that life would take care of showing her." The next day, Ernest took all the documents gathered, including the last page, to the courthouse. The file was complete. The district attorney's office no longer needed more evidence. All that remained was to wait for the final hearing, where Martha would testify as the main affected party, and where the judge would deliver the definitive ruling on the property, the will, and Roger's crimes. But not everything ended there. A week later, while Michael was playing in the yard of his new house with a ball, an envelope without a return address slid under the door. Martha opened it carefully. Inside, there was a copy of a check issued from a bank account in Matthew's name. In her name. With an amount that no one had mentioned before. And a short, handwritten note in shaky handwriting. "For Michael. For when he has wings." Martha felt a chill. She went straight to Ernest. They searched Matthew's old papers. They found the original deposit receipt. Matthew had opened that account 20 years ago. It had remained untouched. It was used to save the little he could put aside with each paycheck, each day of work under the sun. Matthew didn't leave a fortune, but what he left was untouchable. A clean legacy, honest, unalterable. Now Michael would have something more than a story to tell. He would have proof. He would have memory. He would have dignity backed up. That same afternoon, Martha sat with him in the living room. She handed him the check, folded carefully, and told him, "Your grandfather didn't have much, but he left you what he valued most, not for you to spend it, but so you can never say that you don't come from someone who loved you with everything he had." Michael took it with respect. He didn't yet understand the weight of that paper. But he did understand the tone of his grandmother's voice. And what neither of them knew was that someone else was about to knock on that door with unexpected news, a name from the past, and a message that was still dormant, waiting to be told. The sun was barely peeking over the rooftops when Ernest parked the car in front of an old legal office in the center of Queens. The sign read, Robert Cisneros, Notary Public, in slightly faded but still legible gold letters. It was one of those offices that retained the dignity of the years, with dark wooden furniture, the smell of old paper, and a calm that commanded respect. Martha accompanied him in silence, with the folder under her arm. That folder that now contained the last page of Matthew's letter, the original check found days earlier, the copies of the 2 contradictory deeds, and the testimonies provided by Lisa. Everything was ready. When the lawyer saw them enter, he stood up with a cordial gesture. "Please come in. I was expecting you." Ernest greeted him firmly. Martha did so with a thread of a voice. "Thank you for seeing us, attorney," she said. "It's the least I can do after what you told me on the phone, Mr. Ernest." Robert motioned to the seats across from his desk. "Did you bring the documentation?" Martha nodded. She placed the folder on the desk and opened it. The lawyer began to review sheet by sheet. As he progressed, his face became more serious. "This is serious," he murmured, stopping at the final page of the letter. "The signature is authentic. The language, the clarity of the dates, everything indicates that Matthew knew perfectly well what he was doing. This page is key." "Can it help strengthen the complaint?" Ernest asked. "Not only that, it can be the evidence that tips everything in your favor. It's clear here that Matthew not only distrusted Roger, but he clearly established his will. And that, in legal terms, weighs more than any falsified document." Martha looked down. She knew she was about to close a chapter, but she also felt a strange emptiness, as if, with every signature, every paper handed over, Matthew was leaving a little more. Robert continued, "We are going to present this as an extension of evidence to the district attorney's office. Also, I myself signed the original deed for the land as the notary. I can declare that there is no record or evidence of a subsequent valid transfer." "And the false deed?" Martha asked. "It was already annulled by the judge in the initial ruling. All that remains is for the district attorney to define the criminal penalties against Roger. From what I understand, he is in preventive custody." "And Jennifer?" Martha said, in a softer voice. "She is not listed as a direct accomplice, but if it is proven that she knew the contents of the will or collaborated in hiding key documents, she could be subpoenaed. Everything will depend on how she cooperates." Martha pressed her lips together. Despite everything, she didn't wish to see her daughter behind bars. Not for her, but for Michael. She didn't want him to grow up with the memory of an absent mother because of the truth. Before leaving, Robert handed them a certified copy of his statement as a notary. He also gave them the number of the prosecutor in charge of the case and advised them to remain vigilant against any attempt at appeal. Leaving the office, Martha felt her legs shaking. She stopped in front of a sidewalk and sat down. Ernest knelt beside her. "Are you okay?" "Yes, I just needed to breathe. It's almost over." "No." She looked him in the eyes. "It is over. The rest is bureaucracy. The important thing is done, speaking the truth." They returned home at the end of the afternoon. Michael was waiting for them at the entrance with his drawing notebook. "Where were you?" "With a friend of your grandfather's," Martha replied, stroking his hair. "The one who signed the papers for the house when he bought it? Is everything fixed now?" "Almost. We just need the judge to say out loud what we already know, that this house, this land, this story was always ours." That night, while they were having dinner, Someone knocked on the door. Martha got up. Opening it, she found a tall man in a simple suit with a cordial expression. "Mrs. Martha Baker?" "Yes. My name is Gabriel Smith. I am a public defender. I represent a man who is in custody and asked to speak with you before the trial." "Who?" "Roger Esposito. He says he wants to give you something that belongs to you, but with one condition." "Which is?" "That you go alone." The door remained ajar. Ernest approached in silence. Martha said nothing. She just lowered her gaze, and she knew, without anyone saying it, that something else had not yet been told, and that what Roger held in his hands could change the course of everything again. The night before had been restless. Martha couldn't sleep since the public defender knocked on her door with the unexpected message. Roger wanted to talk to her, alone. He said he had something that belonged to her, and for some reason she couldn't explain, she sensed it wasn't a trap. Not this time. Michael was sleeping in his room, wrapped in his blue blanket, with a small drawing in his hand that he had made that afternoon. His grandmother sitting on a bench, with the boy asleep on her lap. He had titled it, "How I Got Better." Ernest, who usually didn't interfere in decisions he considered intimate, asked when he saw her so thoughtful. "Are you going to go?" Martha nodded, without taking her eyes off the candle burning in front of Matthew's portrait. "Yes, I don't know what he wants, but I need to close this chapter with my own eyes. It's not enough for me to know that he's arrested. I want to hear from his mouth why he did it. What drove him to this?" "You don't need to give anyone an explanation," Ernest said. "He doesn't deserve it. I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it for me and for Michael." That morning, Martha left early for the Manhattan Detention Complex, accompanied only by attorney Gabriel Smith, who guided her through the access procedures as if he had done it 1,000 times. The visiting room was almost empty. 3 tables occupied. An officer in the corner and discreet cameras on the ceilings. When Roger entered, she barely recognized him. His face was drawn, his hair overgrown and unkempt, his gaze grey. He was no longer the arrogant man who had scorned her in the church, nor the one who tried to rip her grandson away. He looked more like a man defeated by himself. He sat across from her without touching the table. He lowered his gaze and waited a few seconds before speaking. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't come out of courtesy," she replied firmly. "I came because you said you had something that belongs to me." Roger nodded. He took a folded envelope from his pocket, sealed with tape. He placed it on the table and pushed it toward her. "This I found among Matthew's papers weeks after his death. It was in a toolbox, hidden in the bottom compartment. I never showed it to Jennifer. I thought it was worthless, until I saw your face at the church." Martha opened the envelope cautiously. Inside was a yellowish sheet, written in a firm hand. She immediately recognized Matthew's handwriting. She read it slowly. It was a letter addressed to Roger. "If you are reading this, it means you decided to go ahead with your plans. I am not surprised. I saw your intentions from the beginning. But I want you to know something. You won't win. You can have papers, seals, even deceive Jennifer. But what you don't have is truth. And that, sooner or later, prevails. If you betray my wife, and if you use Michael as currency, know that this will be your sentence. Because children do not forget, and those who have no memory do not deserve a legacy." Martha felt her throat close up. "Why are you giving it to me now?" "Because I have nowhere left to run. Because Michael looked at me, and I understood that that boy will never remember me with respect. And you will. You will accompany him. You will tell him who his grandfather was. I just want him not to hate me. That one day if he asks about me, you tell him I was a coward, but that in the end, I tried to make amends. That is not for me to decide, Martha said. That will be up to him, and for him to hear it, I first have to teach him to forgive without justifying, as Matthew did, as I had to do. Roger lowered his head. I have nothing left, but if I can do anything else, anything at all, tell me. Martha looked at him one last time. Yes, you can stay here, watching from afar as someone else raises the son you tried to mold with fear. That will be enough. She got up without looking back. That same afternoon, Martha arrived home with the envelope in her hands. Ernest and Michael were in the yard, watering the plants. Is everything okay? Ernest asked. Yes, better than I expected. Michael ran toward her. Where were you? Fixing the past, so you have a clean future. And is it fixed now? Martha knelt down in front of him. Yes, son, it is. But as they spoke, a white van parked in front of the house. A man in a dark suit got out, with a briefcase in his hand. He knocked on the door decisively. Ernest was the one who opened it. Mr. Ernest Baker? Yes, I'm here on behalf of the National Bureau of Records. An old document has surfaced in the name of Matthew Baker, which could implicate a living relative no one has mentioned. What did you say? The man took out a sheet with an official letterhead. Matthew had a brother, and it seems that he is still alive. Ernest stood in the doorway, motionless, processing what he had just heard. In front of him, the official from the National Bureau of Records showed him an official document with stamps and signatures. The information was clear. Matthew Baker had been registered with the same parents as another child, Ernest Baker. A brother, the brother Ernest believed had died in childhood. Martha reached the entrance at that moment, with a glass of water for Michael in her hand. Seeing Ernest's face, she stopped. Is everything okay? Ernest didn't answer right away. He just held out the sheet to her. Martha read it slowly. Her breath hitched when she reached the end. Does this mean what? Yes, Ernest murmured, his eyes moist. Matthew was my brother. Michael, who approached curiously seeing the adults gathered, asked innocently, Did my grandpa have a brother? Yes, son, Martha said, kneeling down to his level. And that brother lives here with us. Michael opened his eyes in surprise. He looked at Ernest and said, Then you're my family too. Ernest smiled, his eyes full of tears. Always, champ. We just didn't know it. The official explained that upon reviewing the files for Matthew's case, they found a genetic match from old tests used by the social services decades ago. As part of a process of digitizing old records, they managed to link registrations that were previously dispersed due to archival errors. One of those cases was that of two brothers separated during a fire at the Queen's Orphanage in 1964. It was a miracle that the Baker last name wasn't lost in the database, the official explained, and even more so that both were alive for so long without knowing it. After signing the validation documents, the man respectfully said goodbye. It is now official. Matthew and Ernest were brothers. Legally, you are his only living, direct blood relative, Mr. Ernest. Martha felt a knot in her chest. For an instant, she felt guilty for not having discovered it earlier, but she also understood that everything had happened when it was meant to happen. That same afternoon, Ernest locked himself in his room. He took out the wooden box where he kept childhood memories. Black and white photographs, a St. Martin de Porres prayer card, and a folded letter he had never had the courage to read. It was the last one Matthew wrote to him before being separated from the orphanage, according to the social worker at the time. The letter said, If life ever brings me back to you, I will hug you without saying anything, because so much time will have passed that there will be no need to explain anything. That night, Ernest approached Martha while she was watering the plants in the yard. I want to ask you something. Of course. I want the key to the old storage shed, the one Matthew locked before he got sick. Martha looked at him in silence. I haven't opened it since he died. I never had the strength. I think it's time. The next morning, they walked to the back of the property. There was the rusted metal shed, with a thick padlock that had hung unopened for years. Martha reached into the bottom of the toolbox and pulled out a key wrapped in an old napkin. Ready? Ernest asked. Ready. They opened the door. The inside smelled of old wood, oil, and earth. There were tools, empty cans, and boxes covered with blankets. Ernest knelt down in front of one of them. Removing the blanket, he found a smaller box, closed with metal clasps. Inside was a spiral notebook, an old knife, a photograph of Matthew with Michael in his arms, and a savings passbook with Ernest's name as the beneficiary. Martha approached and saw the annotation on the first page of the notebook. If I can't tell you in life, at least know this. I never stopped looking for you. Ernest closed his eyes and was silent for a long time. Then he hugged Martha without saying a word. In the background, Michael watched the scene from the doorway, not understanding everything, but knowing that something important had happened. Something that closed one chapter and opened another. But just when they thought nothing else could surprise them, the house phone rang. Martha answered. It was the prosecutor. Mrs. Martha, a request for testimony has just arrived, from someone who says they have information about Matthew's death. Who? A former construction worker. He says he worked with him until his last day, and that his death was not what you think. Martha hung up the phone without making a sound. The prosecutor's voice still echoed in her chest. A witness had appeared, someone who claimed that Matthew's death was not just a heart attack, as everyone believed. Someone who had worked with him until the last day. A construction worker, a man named Julian. And according to the prosecutor, that man not only remembered details, but was willing to speak. Ernest, she called from the hallway doorway. We have to go to the district attorney's office first thing tomorrow morning. Something important has come up. Ernest came down from the second floor with a pale face, as if something inside him already knew that the peace wasn't going to last long. What happened? There's a witness. Someone who says Matthew's death was not natural, that it was not what we all believe. Ernest clenched his jaw. Are you saying someone killed him? I don't know, but something is not right. That night, Martha could barely sleep. In her head, again and again, she went over the day she found Matthew on the back patio floor, next to the tools. She told herself it had been his heart, that it was fatigue, age, stress. But now, all of that was crumbling. The next morning, both arrived at the district attorney's offices downtown. The prosecutor was waiting for them there, along with a man with a weathered face, thick hands, and sun-beaten skin. He had the body of someone who worked decades on scaffolding and the gaze of someone who kept more than he should have. Are you Julian Sanchez? Martha asked. Yes, ma'am. I worked with Mr. Matthew for the last 3 years, and I was with him that day. Martha's heart was beating so hard she felt like her voice wouldn't come out. What did you see? Julian rubbed his hands, uncomfortable. That day, Mr. Matthew and I went to check a piece of land he planned to build on. But first, we stopped by the house. His son-in-law was there. He didn't come in to say hello. He just approached the car and spoke to him quietly. I didn't hear everything, but I saw how Mr. Matthew turned pale. He told him, I'm not giving you anything. And he got angry. Roger? Yes, Ma'am. Then we went to the land. Matthew was very agitated. His blood pressure dropped. I offered to take him to the doctor, but he told me no, that he wanted to leave some things in the shed first. Back at the house, he went in alone. He asked me to wait in the car. And then I heard a thud. I ran. He was lying on the floor. Roger was leaving through the back door. He didn't look at me. He just got in his car and drove away. I approached Matthew. He wasn't responding anymore. I called emergency services. I said I found him like that because I was afraid, and because Roger threatened me afterward. He told me that if I opened my mouth, my family would pay for it. Martha was frozen. Ernest closed his eyes. Are you willing to testify to that before the judge? Yes, I'm not afraid anymore. Because what you have done, what the lady has done for that boy, deserves justice. And because Mr. Matthew was a man who didn't deserve to die like that. The prosecutor took note of everything. We are going to subpoena him as a formal witness. This information changes the course of the case. What seemed like a natural death can now be classified as negligent homicide or even premeditated if we can prove intent. That same afternoon, Jennifer appeared at Martha's house without prior notice. I need to talk to you. Martha didn't make her wait. She received her in the living room with Ernest present. Michael was in his room, drawing. What do you want now? Jennifer's face was distraught. I was summoned to give a statement for omission, for not having said anything about the letter, for not having prevented the forgery of the documents. They say that if I don't cooperate, I could be prosecuted. And did you know, Jennifer? Did you know what he did to Matthew? Not for sure, but I suspected it, and I didn't do anything. Martha pressed her lips together. She didn't respond immediately. Are you going to testify? Yes. I want to clean up at least a part of the mess I allowed. Not for you, not for him, for Michael, because that boy doesn't deserve to carry the shame of his parents. Martha looked at her sternly, but also with a touch of sadness. Then speak, but don't expect me to hug you afterward. I don't expect it. Before leaving, Jennifer looked toward the hallway where Michael was playing. She saw his back, concentrated on his paper. Does he still call me Mum? Martha didn't answer. Jennifer left with her head bowed. That night, Martha wrote in her diary. It was the first time she had done so since Matthew's death. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't resentment. Just loose words. There is no justice without truth. There is no forgiveness without memory. And there is no greater inheritance than a child who knows where he comes from. The next day, the prosecutor called again. He had a new piece of information in his hands. Mrs. Martha, we found a recording in Roger's old office, an audio. He himself confessing something we can't ignore. I need you to come in tomorrow. What does it say? That Matthew had discovered one more document, one that doesn't appear in the file, one that we haven't found yet, a document that could change the whole story. The afternoon was slowly falling over the city, staining the walls of the house with a golden, melancholic light. Martha, sitting by the dining room window, kept her gaze fixed on the horizon while Matthew's letter rested on her lap. Across the yard, Ernest was pruning a rose bush that Matthew had planted years ago. Both knew that the quiet days were borrowed, and that truths, when they come out of hiding, bring storms and revelations with them. The landline phone rang with a sharp sound. Martha stood up immediately. She answered. Hello? The prosecutor's voice was firm and direct. Mrs. Martha, I need you to come in first thing tomorrow morning. We located the document we mentioned in the previous call. It was stored in an alternate notary's office in your husband's name. It was registered with a protected key. The content is going to change everything. Is it legal? Completely. But you need to see it yourself. No one else. Martha hung up, her heart racing. Ernest looked at her from the yard, knowing that something else had been unearthed. That night, while they ate dinner in silence, Michael drew at the table with his elbows resting and his gaze concentrated. Martha served him a little more baked beans. What are you drawing now? A closed door. And why? Because not everything behind it is bad. Sometimes what you need is waiting for you to dare to open it. Martha didn't know what to say, but those words pierced her chest as if they hadn't come from a child. After dinner, while Ernest was clearing the dishes, Martha went up to Michael's room to say goodnight. She found him with his notebook closed, hugging his pillow. "Grandma," he said in a low voice, "if everything is over tomorrow, will you be okay?" "Why do you ask that?" "Because grown-ups sometimes get tired after fighting so much. And you've fought a lot." Martha stroked his head. "I'll be fine as long as you're fine. Okay?" The boy nodded. He closed his eyes. But in the silence of the early morning, something moved in the house. The front door barely creaked. A small silhouette slid down the hallway with a backpack slung over his shoulder and a folded piece of paper in his hand. Michael had left. He had left a letter on the dining room table, a sheet on which he wrote in clear handwriting, "I'm going to look for what my grandfather left hidden. I don't want anyone else to touch it before me. Don't follow me. I'm fine." Martha woke up just before dawn. She felt something strange in the air. She went downstairs and saw the door ajar, the letter on the table. Her heart sank. "Ernest," she shouted. "Michael is gone." He ran down, read the note, and put his hand to his forehead. Where could he have gone? Martha took a deep breath. There is one place, one that Matthew mentioned in a low voice, where he said he kept the most valuable things, but he never said exactly where it was, only that it was the corner where his story began. And what is that corner? Queens. Where he was raised, where he was separated from his brother, where he dreamed of having a family for the first time. Ernest already had the car keys in his hand. Let's go. The drive to Queens was silent. Martha held Michael's note against her chest as if it were a compass. They arrived at the old neighborhood when the sun was barely beginning to warm the cobblestone streets. They passed the old church where Matthew had been baptized, the alley where he learned to ride a bicycle, the elementary school where he attended up to 3rd grade, until Ernest stopped the car in front of a vacant lot, surrounded by rusted chain-link fence. "Here," Martha whispered. This was the backyard of the shelter where Matthew was as a child. They entered on foot, and in the background, sitting on a stone, with his feet dirty and his eyes bright, was Michael. Martha ran toward him. She hugged him without scolding him. "What were you looking for?" "My grandpa. Something of his. Something no one else has touched." He pulled a small wooden box with a cracked lid from his backpack. "It was under the dirt. Here. It had this." Inside were an old watch, a sealed letter, and a photograph of Matthew and Ernest as children, hugging. Martha couldn't contain her tears. "How did you know it was here?" "I didn't know. I just felt it, as if he was calling me." Ernest took the letter with trembling hands. The envelope read, "For when my grandson knows who he is." Martha looked at him with a knot in her throat. "Let's go home. It's time for that letter to be opened. But not without you, Michael. Because you are the one who most deserves to hear what it says. Because you are the living legacy of that man." And as they walked back along the dirt road, no one noticed that from a corner, a figure was watching them. Someone who had not yet spoken the last word, and whose presence was going to shake everything they thought was over again. The courtroom of the Fourth Family Court in New York was full, not because of the number of people, but because of the tension that could be breathed in every corner. The fans hummed overhead while the court clerk organized files on the table. Martha sat on the wooden bench next to Ernest, her hands clasped and her face serene. There was no fear in her, but a contained anticipation that squeezed her chest. Michael was not present. He had stayed home with Lisa, who was taking care of him as if he were her own. Jennifer was also not in the room. She had decided not to attend, according to her lawyer, but she had submitted her written statement notarized. In it, she acknowledged her omission, her silence, and her partial knowledge of the facts. On the left, with an officer beside him, was Roger, handcuffed and silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. The judge entered promptly. He sat down without looking at anyone in particular and slowly opened the file. His voice boomed in the room like an invisible hammer. Today resolves the civil succession and property lawsuit filed by Mrs. Martha Baker against citizen Roger Esposito in relation to the forgery of the will of the deceased Matthew Baker and the fraudulent transfer of assets in the name of the accused. The reading of the resolution lasted more than 30 minutes. It detailed evidence, testimonies, notary reports, expert declarations, handwriting analyses, and the audio where Roger himself admitted to modifying documents. The judge was clear, direct, and meticulous. When he finished reading, he was silent for a few seconds that felt eternal. In light of all the foregoing, this court declares that the document presented by the accused as a valid will lacks legality and recognizes Mrs. Martha Baker as the legitimate owner of the real estate, associated accounts, and inheritance rights. A murmur spread through the room. Ernest bowed his head with relief. Martha did not move. She only exhaled with moist eyes. The judge continued. Likewise, this ruling is referred to the district attorney for the corresponding criminal effects. The accused will remain in preventive custody until his legal status is determined in the criminal process for forgery of documents and aggravated attempted dispossession. Roger did not protest. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He only closed his eyes for a moment and lowered his head further. As if at that instant he surrendered not only to justice, but to everything he could no longer control. Leaving the courthouse, the press was waiting for them. Cameras, microphones, journalists. Everyone wanted a statement from the grandmother who defeated the scammer son-in-law. Martha did not speak. She only said one brief sentence, looking up at the sky. An inheritance is not won, it is honored. That night, back home, Michael greeted them with a nervous smile. Did we win? Martha hugged him tightly. Yes, my boy, we won. But it wasn't because of the judge. It was because of the truth. And now? Now it's your turn to keep writing this story. You are the most valuable thing your grandfather left. Never forget that. Michael sat in his favorite corner of the yard. He opened his notebook and began to draw a house, one very similar to his, with a woman in the entrance, with a shawl and a firm gaze, and a boy smiling next to her. But just before dinner, someone knocked on the door. It was a messenger. He brought a sealed envelope with a letterhead Martha hadn't seen before. It came from a Queen's private archive, reserved for lost wills or documents without a recipient for more than a decade. Inside, a single sheet, and a name written by hand in blue ink, Supplementary Will of Matthew Baker. And at the end of that sheet, one more line. This document should only be opened in the presence of Michael Baker, the day he asks for his complete history. The images of the court hearing were repeated on the news and social media, But Martha did not turn on the television. She didn't need to see Roger's downfall to know that he no longer had power. It was enough to remember his face when the judge read the sentence, his dull eyes, his slumped shoulders, and that final expression that was not rage or sadness, but absolute defeat. 3 days had passed since they received the sealed envelope with Matthew's supplementary will, the one that should only be opened in Michael's presence. The sheet remained intact, stored in the wooden box on the shelf in Martha's room, next to the last photograph she had of her husband. That day dawned with cloudy skies, as if the weather also sensed that something definitive was about to happen. Martha and Ernest were summoned by the district attorney's office to be formally notified of the criminal resolution against Roger. Upon arrival, the atmosphere was different. There was no press. There were no spectators. Only the necessary people and the weight of what had happened. The prosecutor received them in private. "It's official," he said, without mincing words. "Mr. Roger Esposito has been sentenced to 7 years in prison for forgery of official documents, aggravated attempted dispossession, and illicit use of notary functions. The evidence provided was irrefutable. The handwriting analysis, the hospital videos, the testimonies, everything matches." "And will he appeal?" Ernest asked. "His defense tried, but they lack arguments. Furthermore, the confession recorded by Lisa voids everything. The prosecutor's office didn't even have to pressure him. He himself admitted the fraud." Martha lowered her gaze. She didn't celebrate. She didn't regret it. She just sighed. "And what happens now with Jennifer?" "Mrs. Jennifer Baker was exonerated from direct criminal responsibility, thanks to her cooperation, her testimony, and the fact that it was not proven that she actively participated in the forgery, but her public credibility was damaged. It will be up to her to rebuild or not." Martha nodded without further comment. Leaving the building, the sky opened and the rain suddenly poured down, heavy, without warning. Ernest ran to cover Martha with his jacket, but she stopped in the middle of the street, closed her eyes, and let the water soak her. "This is also justice," she said, as if to herself. "Let the earth cleanse itself. Let the air carry away the resentment." That afternoon, back home, Michael was waiting for them with a question in his eyes. "Is it over now?" Martha hugged him tightly. "What needed to end has ended. But now comes the most important thing." "What?" Martha took the box with the supplementary will. She handed it to Michael. "Your grandfather wrote this, just for you. He said it should be opened when you wanted to know the whole story." Michael looked at her seriously. Then he nodded. He opened the box. He took out the envelope with his small but firm hands. He carefully broke the seal. Inside, a folded sheet. He unfolded it and began to read aloud, in a clear voice, while Martha and Ernest listened without interrupting. "Michael, if you are reading this, it is because time did its job, because your grandmother was stronger than I could be, because they did not allow my voice to be completely extinguished. This is not a legal will. It is an emotional legacy. In this letter, I do not leave you property or objects. I leave you my history, because I want you to know where you come from, because when you know who you were, you will know who you can become." Michael paused. He took a deep breath. "As a child, I was abandoned, separated from my brother, forgotten by many. But life gave me a second chance, your grandmother, and then you. You were the first person to call me Grandpa with eyes full of light. Since that day, I knew that everything I built was worth it." Martha covered her mouth. Ernest clenched his teeth. "And if someone ever tries to tell you that you are less, that you are worthless, that you are undeserving, Remind them that you come from a woman who resisted without breaking, and from a man who, although he lost a lot, never stopped loving. Michael finished reading. The sheet trembled between his fingers. Martha hugged him with her eyes closed, while Ernest wrapped his arms around both of them. But just when everything seemed peaceful, someone knocked on the door. It was Jennifer. Her face was clean, without makeup, her hair pulled back, and a letter in her hand. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said. "Just to give this back." Martha looked at her in silence. "What is it?" "A letter I wrote and never sent you. When you were at the hospital, when they called you a beggar in front of everyone. I felt so guilty. I couldn't even look at you. But I kept it. And I think now, finally, you can read it." Martha took it. "And what are you going to do?" "Leave. I'm leaving the city. I don't want Michael to grow up confused. I just hope that someday he remembers me with some tenderness." And before leaving, Jennifer knelt down in front of her son. "I'm sorry, Michael, for what I allowed, for what I didn't defend, for what I made you feel." Michael didn't respond. He just watched her walk away from the door. Martha, with Jennifer's letter in her hand, closed the door calmly, but she didn't open it right away, because before reading what her daughter had written in silence, she still had to write the last chapter of her own story. One that was not about the past, but about the future that was about to begin. Martha had Jennifer's letter in her hands, but she didn't open it. It had been kept in the bottom of a drawer for 2 days, as if the simple act of reading it could reopen a wound that was just beginning to heal. She didn't feel hatred nor tenderness. What stopped her was something more complex, a mixture of fatigue and memory, because there were words that, although well-intentioned, arrived when they were no longer needed. That morning, Michael went to school with Ernest. Martha took advantage of the silence in the house to sit in the kitchen with the letter in front of her. She opened the window. She let the wind come in. And only then, she unfolded the paper. "Mum, I know I don't have the right to ask you to read this, but I'm writing to you anyway. I know I made mistakes, and that I allowed things that I never should have allowed. There hasn't been a single day that I haven't regretted leaving you alone. Not one. Sometimes I wonder when I became someone who looked at you with shame, when all you ever did was love me. I let myself be carried away by empty promises, by a man who made me believe that you were an obstacle. And the saddest part is that I believed him." Martha took a deep breath. She didn't cry. "I don't know if you will ever forgive me. I don't deserve it. But at least I want you to know that today, after everything that has happened, I understand the value of your silence. Because you never yelled, you never complained, and yet you won. Not with words, with dignity. Michael chose you, and I understand, because I would have too, if I had had the courage to really look at you from the beginning. I'm not looking for you to hug me. I just wanted you to know that it hurts, and that I admire you, even if it's too late." Martha folded the letter slowly. She put it back in the envelope, sealed it, and put it in the same drawer where she kept Matthew's medicines. Then she locked everything and went out to the yard. She sat on the stone bench and looked at the small guava tree that Matthew had planted years ago. The same one that never bore fruit, but that they never cut down. "Sometimes, what doesn't bloom still provides shade," she said softly. In the afternoon, Ernest returned with Michael. The boy ran to hug her with his backpack still on his back. "Grandma, I wrote something at school today. Can I read it to you?" "Of course, my dear. Go ahead." Michael took a folded sheet from his notebook. He stood in front of her as if he were about to present an official speech. "It's called My Home." "Let's hear it." My home is not big. It has no luxuries, but it smells like coffee and warm bread. It has a woman who waits for me even when I mess up. It has a man who helps me understand that crying is not for the weak. And it has a silence that doesn't feel heavy, because in my home, no one hides anything anymore. In my home, there is memory, and that is why, in my home, you can live. Martha couldn't contain her emotion. She hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Did you like it?" "More than any will," she replied. But just as the day seemed to be ending calmly, the landline phone rang again. Martha answered. A young woman's voice on the other end. "Mrs. Martha Baker?" "Yes. Who is speaking?" "My name is Brenda Roman. I am a social worker for New York Social Services. I am in charge of an old file that was opened following a search request. I have in my possession a file that you need to see." "What file?" "That of Matthew Baker, and that of a boy who was registered as his son before Jennifer was born." Martha was speechless. "A son?" "Yes, ma'am. He is not listed in the will, but he exists. He was given up for adoption in 1973, under circumstances that are not fully detailed. But there's something else. That son has just appeared. And he asked for you." The rain had fallen all night, as if the sky also needed to release what it was holding. The next morning, the sun barely peeked through the clouds when Martha sat alone on the patio bench with Brenda Roman's letter in her hands. The social worker had not exaggerated. The file was real. Matthew and she had had a son before Jennifer, when they had only been married for a couple of years. The boy had been born in complicated conditions, at a moment so fragile economically and family-wise that Matthew, according to the papers, signed adoption documents to protect him. Martha didn't remember any of it, because she hadn't been told. They signed on her behalf when she was hospitalized due to complications from childbirth. A decision made behind her back. And now, so many years later, that son had appeared. He wasn't looking for money. He didn't want revenge. He only asked for one thing: to meet his mother. Ernest approached in silence and sat down beside her. There was no need to ask. He already knew. He had heard her cry in the kitchen during the night and read the entire file out loud, again and again, as if that would bring back the memory that had been stolen from her. "Where is he?" Ernest asked. "In a temporary shelter with social services. He was raised in several homes. He never knew his real name until a year ago. He started searching, and when he saw my name in the news because of the trial, he knew it was me." "And what are you going to do?" Martha looked at him with a mixture of fear and determination. "I'm going to meet him." The social worker arranged a private meeting for them. It was in a simple office with green curtains and cream-colored walls. Michael wanted to go with her. Martha hesitated, but in the end, she allowed him to come. She knew Michael was growing up, and he deserved to see how real wounds were closed. He stayed outside the room. Martha entered. The man was a little over 40 years old. Black hair, a face marked by life, a serene gaze. Seeing her, he stood up. "You are—" "Yes, I'm Martha." She didn't know what else to say. He looked at her with a smile that asked for nothing. "I'm not here to ask you for anything. I just wanted to know if you existed. And now I know." "Forgive me," she whispered, her eyes welling up. "I never knew. They hid it from me. They took you from me without asking. And there's not a day that goes by that it doesn't hurt to imagine what you went through." He approached slowly. He didn't hug her. He just offered her his hand. "I'm Louis. They gave me that name when I was 3. I've lived many lives. But today, I just wanted to close this one. With you." They talked for more than an hour, Louis told her his story, his childhood in other people's homes, his youth full of work and silence. He never hated. He just kept asking questions. Martha told him about Matthew, about Michael, about how little was left, but how much could still be born. Leaving, Michael was waiting for them with a notebook on his lap. He was drawing the tree in the yard. Louis knelt down next to him. "Are you Michael?" "Yes, I am your uncle." Michael looked at him, tilted his head, and smiled. "Then I can draw you too." That night, back home, Martha sat with Ernest in the kitchen. "I never imagined I would have to learn to be a mother again at my age." "You won't do it alone." She took the key to the old cupboard, where Matthew kept important papers. She took out a new blank sheet. "I'm going to write a will, but not of assets, of truths. For whom? For Michael, for Louis, for whoever comes after, so that no one ever has to guess who their family was again." Michael peeked through the doorway with his notebook open. "Grandma, can I read you what I wrote today?" "Of course." Michael read. "A family is not who sees you born. It is who looks for you. It is who waits for you, even when you don't know anyone is waiting for you. And it is who, when you arrive, says, 'Welcome, you are already part of who we are.'" Martha hugged him. But before going to sleep, she received one more call. It was Lisa. "Mrs. Martha, I was invited to speak at a human rights convention. They want me to tell your story. Yours, Michael's, Matthew's." Martha looked at her grandson sleeping. "Then tell them to prepare a space." "For what?" "For the finale. Because something is still missing, and I want everyone to hear it." The sun beat down fiercely on the streets of rural Pennsylvania that noon, but inside the newly inaugurated small community clinic, the atmosphere was serene, almost sacred. The walls, painted white with sky-blue accents, reflected a simple peace. On the sign at the entrance, carved in rustic wood, the name was clearly readable: Martha's Community Clinic. Michael, barely 27 years old, dressed in his white coat, held an envelope in his hand while waiting for the room to fill completely. Beside him was Martha, now advanced in years, but with the same composure that led her through a lifetime of humiliations, losses, and silence without giving up. Ernest, now with completely white hair, occupied the front row. Lisa, the nurse who changed the course of history, held a bouquet of sunflowers. The inauguration was not just a medical event, it was an act of remembrance, an intimate ceremony named for justice. Michael took the microphone calmly. He took a deep breath and looked at his grandmother. "This clinic is named after you, Grandma, not because you are a symbolic figure, but because here, every room was designed with the story you taught me. A story that was not written in books, but with silences, with resilience, and with tenderness." The audience was silent. Michael continued. "Today we open this place for those who, like you, were once rejected for not having nice clothes, or degrees, or important last names. This space is for people who carry a whole life on their shoulders, and who only need someone to look at them with respect." He opened the envelope he was holding. It was a framed copy of the first drawing he had made of his grandmother as a child, her sitting on the church bench, with the shawl around her neck, her face tired and her heart whole. He showed it to everyone. "This drawing saved me, because even though they tore it up, even though they tried to hide it, it remained alive, like my grandmother." Applause erupted. Martha did not cry. She only placed her hand over her chest. What she felt was not pride. It was rest. After the event, in the clinic's administrative office, Michael handed his grandmother a small box with a lock. I saved this for this day. It is my dad's legacy, and now it is yours too. Martha opened it. Inside were Matthew's original letters, the old watch, and a note written by Michael. Everything I am started with you. Later, while attending to the first patient, a country woman with swollen feet and a sun-weathered face, Michael offered her a seat, washed her feet with warm water, and looked her in the eyes. No one is less here. You are welcome here. The woman, hearing that, shed a tear. At nightfall, Martha sat alone in the clinic hallway. She looked up at the sky, the cool breeze caressing her face. Matthew, it is done. We have fulfilled it. Your hands can rest now. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to continue joining us. Subscribe to the channel, activate the little bell so you don't miss the next stories, and leave your like if you believe that respect, love, and dignity can change destinies. And if you made it this far, comment the word dignity so we know you were with us until the end. We are excited to read your comments. Also, if you want this channel to continue sharing stories like Martha's, you can leave your super thanks. With your support, we will continue planting stories that are born from the heart. Thank you for listening. And remember, where there is memory, there is inheritance. Where there is truth, there is justice. And where there is love, there is always a place to return.